My mother lifted her wine glass and said, "To Paige, for saving your father's accounts." The four of us were sitting around the dining room table, under the brass chandelier Dad had threatened to replace since 2009. Paige gave a modest little laugh and tucked her blonde hair behind one ear. Dad stared at his meatloaf. I could see his left thumb rubbing the edge of his napkin back and forth, back and forth. Mom looked directly at me when she added, "Thank God someone in this family understands money." Paige lowered her glass. "Mom, what? I'm complimenting you." 3 weeks earlier, I might have swallowed it. I had swallowed worse with mashed potatoes. Instead, I reached into my work bag and took out Dad's black composition notebook. The cover was softened at the corners, and a pale ring from his coffee mug crossed the word composition. Dad's hand stopped moving. I placed it beside Paige's spotless spreadsheet. Paige went pale before I opened it. That was the moment I understood she already knew what I had found. 3 weeks earlier, I was standing barefoot in my kitchen, trying to decide whether a carton of yogurt smelled normal, when my father called and asked me what day it was. "Sunday," I said. There was a pause. "I know it's Sunday." "Okay, I'm asking which Sunday." I put the yogurt down. "Dad, where are you?" "The shop." Bennett Sons Heating was closed on Sundays. Also, Bennett had no sons. Dad had named the business 6 years before Paige was born, and 2 years before he finally accepted that I wasn't a temporary daughter, waiting to become a boy. "What are you doing there?" "Finishing the Carver estimate. You sent that Friday." "No, I didn't." "Yes, you did. I emailed it from your desk while you stood behind me and said the word ductwork 14 times. He made a small, irritated sound. That was reassuring. Irritation was my father's resting pulse. Then he said, "The numbers keep moving." I was already reaching for my shoes. "What numbers?" "On the page." "Dad, don't go anywhere. I'm not an idiot, Mara. I didn't say you were. You used the voice." "What voice?" "The one you use on the copier when it jams." I drove the 12 minutes to the shop with my hair still twisted in the clip I wore to wash my face. Dad's truck was parked crooked across 2 spaces. The side door was unlocked. Inside, the office smelled like dust, burnt coffee, and the peppermint gum our lead technician, Ron, chewed to cover the cigarettes he claimed he had quit. Dad was sitting at his desk with his reading glasses upside down on the blotter. An invoice lay in front of him. He looked up when I came in. The left side of his face didn't quite come with the right. Everything inside me went cold and efficient. "Smile for me," I said. "Oh, for God's sake, Dad!" "Smile." He tried. I called 911. He argued through half of the call, then became furious when the dispatcher asked if he could raise both arms. His right arm went up. His left lifted halfway and drifted down like he had changed his mind. "This is ridiculous," he said, except ridiculous came out thick. I knelt beside his chair and held his wrist. "I know. You're making a fuss. I know. Don't call your mother yet." The ambulance was 6 minutes away. "Why?" "She'll call Paige." Even then, with one side of his face slipping and his invoice covered in numbers he couldn't read, his first instinct was to protect my sister from inconvenience. At the hospital, Mom arrived wearing 2 different earrings and carrying Dad's jacket, though it was 81 degrees outside. She found me near the nurse's station and grabbed my forearms. "What happened?" "I found him at the shop. They think it was a mild stroke, but the doctor—" "Why was he at the shop?" "I don't know. You let him work too much." I looked at her. Mom blinked, as if she had heard herself only after the words were out. "I don't mean let. Obviously you can't control him." "No, I can't." She squeezed my arms. "You know how he is." That sentence had done a lot of heavy lifting in our family. "You know how Dad is, so don't tell him he forgot your birthday. You know how Paige is, so don't make her feel guilty for canceling. You know how Mom is, so ignore the part where she blamed you for the medical emergency you interrupted." Dad's stroke was mild, just as they had hoped. He recovered most of his speech by that evening and all of his ability to complain before they moved him upstairs. He told the neurologist he had no medical history worth mentioning. Mom and I corrected him at the same time. He has high blood pressure, I said. And cholesterol, Mom said. Dad frowned. Everybody has cholesterol. The neurologist looked tired enough to leave medicine forever. Paige called while Dad was being taken for imaging. Mom put her on speaker without asking. "Oh my God," Paige said. "Should I come?" Her voice was surrounded by restaurant noise, glasses and laughter, and a bass line pulsing beneath it. Mom answered before I could. "No, honey, there's nothing you can do tonight. I can get on a flight." "Absolutely not. Your father would be furious if you disrupted your work." I looked through the glass panel in the door. Dad was telling an orderly that hospital socks were designed by communists. Paige said, "Mara's there, right?" Mom looked at me and smiled with exhausted relief. Of course. There it was. The family emergency plan in 2 words. Of course. Paige promised to call in the morning. Mom told her to enjoy the rest of her dinner, then hung up and immediately said, she sounded devastated. She sounded like she was at RPM steak. Mom's head snapped toward me. "This isn't the time. I just recognized the music. You always do that." "Know where Paige is? Make a little comment." I went to find coffee. Dad stayed in the hospital for 2 nights and transferred to a rehabilitation center for what was supposed to be a week. I brought his shaving kit, his phone charger, 3 button-down shirts he refused to wear, and the gray sweatpants he claimed made him look institutionalized. Mom brought him a ceramic mug that said, "Still hot," which he found hilarious. Paige sent an enormous flower arrangement that blocked the television. Dad made me move it, then asked 3 separate visitors if they had seen what Paige sent. On the second morning, he caught my wrist as I was leaving. "The 5th third payment," he said. "What about it?" "It goes tomorrow. I scheduled it last week." "No, the other one." "What other one?" His eyes shifted toward Mom, who was fighting with the blinds. "The supply account," he said quietly. "Which supplier?" He released my wrist. "I'll call you. Dad." Not here. At the shop, I found 3 messages from vendors, 2 from customers, and 1 from Ron asking whether payday was still Friday. That last one made me sit down. Payroll was never a question. Dad delayed paying himself, delayed paying me, once paid the electric bill at 11:57 p.m. But he did not play games with the technician's checks. He considered that a point of honor. I logged into the business account. The available balance was $4,318.26. Payroll was a little over $22,000. I refreshed the screen because denial often begins with excellent computer skills. The number stayed there. I checked the savings account. $912. The business credit line, which Dad called the parachute, was nearly maxed out. I called him. He answered in a whisper. "What? Where's the payroll money?" "What do you mean?" "I mean, where is it? Receivables are behind. Not by $20,000. Did you check the Dawson payment? Dawson paid 11 days ago. The Lennox rebate? Already deposited." He breathed into the phone. In the background, I heard the rehabilitation therapist tell someone to lift and hold. "Mara, I can't do this right now. You asked me to look at the supplier payment, and now you've looked." "Dad, Ron just asked me if payroll is clearing." "It'll clear. How?" "I have it written down." I turned toward his desk. Dad kept a black composition notebook in the top right drawer. He had used the same kind for years, buying them in 6-packs every August as if office supplies had a season. Nothing counted to him until it was written in that notebook. Not the software, not the bank website, not the folder of printed statements I had begged him to stop wasting paper on. "Can I look?" I asked. Silence. "Dad?" "Just make payroll." "With what?" "Move it from the other account." "What other account?" "You know the accounts." It landed like an accusation. I looked again at the available balance, then at my own purse hanging from the chair. 2 years earlier, when a commercial customer had gone bankrupt owing us $34,000, I had floated payroll from my savings for 9 days. Dad repaid me and added $100, which he insisted was interest, and I recognized as guilt. "I can cover part of it," I said, temporarily. "No." "Then tell me where the money is." His voice sharpened. I said, "I have it handled." I waited. He sighed. How much can you cover? By Thursday, I had moved $14,000 from my personal savings into the business account. Dad promised it would be back within a week. I told myself I believed him because the alternative would make it hard to breathe. I found enough incoming payments to cover the rest of payroll. Then I started calling suppliers. For 3 days, I lived inside hold music and quiet humiliation. I apologized to people I had known for years without telling them what had happened. I negotiated extensions. I canceled an equipment order. I discovered Dad had promised Ron a raise, but never entered it into payroll, so I fixed that too. Every evening, I visited rehabilitation and gave my parents a cleaned-up version. We're fine, I said. See, Dad told Mom, Mara has it. Mom would pat my hand, our steady one. On Friday, she asked if I could pick up Dad's dry cleaning. The place closes at 6, she said, and I need to be here when the cardiologist comes. He's not seeing a cardiologist. Well, somebody's coming. I'm trying to reconstruct the business accounts. You're so good at that stuff. I'm not a magician, Mom. She gave me a wounded look. I was complimenting you. At the dry cleaner, the woman behind the counter handed me 6 of Dad's shirts and said, Your sister must be so worried. I smiled because I didn't know what else to do. That night, Paige called me for the first time since the stroke. Tell me the truth, she said. How bad is Dad? He's improving. His concentration is still off. He gets tired. I mean the business. I stopped outside my apartment with Dad's shirts hooked over one finger. Why are you asking about the business? He mentioned some account problem. What exactly did he say? That everything got scrambled after he went into the hospital. I almost laughed. After? His words, not mine. The accounts didn't get scrambled because he went to the hospital. Another pause, smaller this time. Then Paige said, Do you need me to come home? I should have said yes. Instead, I heard Dad in the ambulance telling me not to call her. I heard Mom saying her work was demanding. I heard 30 years of our family treating Paige's presence like a special occasion and mine like indoor plumbing. I have it, I said. I knew you would. After the call, I drove back to the shop. The building was dark except for the red exit sign over the side door. I went into Dad's office, opened the top right drawer, and took out the black notebook. A yellow sticky note marked a page near the back. On that page, in Dad's shaky block handwriting, were 6 transfers I had never entered, all labeled with a single letter, P. I read the page 3 times, as if the letter might become something else if I stared long enough. The first transfer was dated almost 7 years earlier, $12,400 marked P, school. Then $8,000 P, rent/bridge. $21,500 P, condo. $14,750 P, taxes. $36,000 P, reset. The last entry was from February. It had a box drawn around it twice. $68,000 P, consulting bridge. Credit line, repay September. Below that, Dad had written, Don't put through regular books yet. Mara will handle if timing tight. I sat down in his chair. There were phrases you could misunderstand. There were coincidences. There might have been a supplier whose name began with P, who went to school and rented a condo and needed $68,000 for consulting. My sister's name was Paige. Her brief attempt to start her own consulting company had ended in March. According to Mom, Paige had received an offer too good to refuse and graciously agreed to return to corporate life. According to Paige, her old firm had begged. According to the notebook in front of me, somebody had needed a bridge. I took out my phone and added the transfers. The total was $160,650. For a few seconds, the calculator numbers meant nothing. They were just clean black marks on a white screen. Then they turned into things. The year I replaced my transmission with a credit card. The Christmas Dad said we had to keep gifts modest because business was slow. The spring, Mom asked me to split the cost of their new furnace, even though my father owned a heating company. I flipped backward through the notebook. Dad's handwriting crowded every page. Customer names, job costs, promises, reminders. He had his own shorthand. A circled R meant Ron. A triangle meant the payment could wait. 3 angry lines under a figure meant someone had disappointed him personally. My name appeared constantly. Mara call, Mara deposit, Mara fix duplicate. Ask Mara what this is. On a page from the previous summer, he had written, Mara can float until Dawson clears. I couldn't remember which shortage that had been. There had been too many. I photographed the 6 transfer page, then hated myself for doing it. I put the phone down, picked it up again, and photographed the surrounding pages too. After that, I tucked the notebook into my work bag. Dad had told me he had everything written down. He had directed me to it without technically giving me permission to read it, which was one of his favorite methods of communication. He liked to leave the door open and blame you for walking through. The rehabilitation center was quiet the next morning. Dad was in a small gym, using his left hand to move plastic rings from one side of a wooden frame to the other. He looked deeply offended by the rings. His therapist, a cheerful man named Malcolm, said, "Frank's doing great." "I'm being trained for a career at a carnival," Dad said. "See? Sense of humor intact. That wasn't a joke." Malcolm winked at me and moved to another patient. I sat in the chair beside Dad. I found the notebook. His left hand froze around a blue ring. He set it down carefully. "Why were you in my desk?" "You told me it was written down." I said I had it written down. "What's the difference?" "The difference is it's my notebook. The money came from the business. Keep your voice down." I looked around. No one was paying attention. An older man was arguing with a foam ball. "Did you give Paige $68,000 in February?" Dad reached for the next ring. It slipped from his fingers. "It was an investment." "You wrote bridge." "Same general idea." "No, it isn't." He tried to pick up the ring again. I could see frustration traveling through his face, but I couldn't tell how much of it belonged to his hand and how much belonged to me. "It had a repayment date," I said. "September." "That's next month." "Is she repaying it?" "She's getting things organized." "Does Mom know?" He finally got hold of the ring and shoved it across the frame. "Your mother doesn't understand the business. Mom understands $68,000. It isn't her concern. It came off a credit line secured by your company, which is mine. And now payroll is coming out of my savings. I told you not to do that. You asked how much I could cover. I was medicated. You were on aspirin." His eyes flashed. For one familiar second, he looked completely like himself. "Why do you always have to make everything sound ugly? I'm using the numbers you wrote down." Paige hit a rough patch. "I helped her." "You helped her with $160,000. His jaw tightened. "She paid some of that back." "How much?" "I don't know off the top of my head. You know everything off the top of your head. You once called me during a vacation because a customer's check was 11 cents short. That's different. Because Paige's name wasn't on the check." He turned away from me. Mom came into the gym carrying 2 coffees and a paper bag. "I found the little cinnamon things you like." She looked from Dad to me. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Dad said. At the same time, I said, "We're discussing the accounts." Mom handed Dad his coffee. "Not here, Mara." I laughed once. I didn't mean to. It just came out. "What?" she said. "Nothing can ever happen where it happens. We always have to move it somewhere else. You know his blood pressure is still unstable." Dad opened the paper bag. "My blood pressure is fine." Mom ignored him. "If there's a business issue, handle it at the business." "That's exactly what I've been doing." She gave me a long, tired look. "Then why bring it here?" Dad bit into a cinnamon twist and got icing on his thumb. I stood up. "Ask Paige." Both of them looked at me. Mom's face changed first. Not recognition exactly, more like a curtain moving in front of a window. "Ask her what?" she said. Dad wiped his thumb on a napkin. Mara's worked herself up over a few transfers to Paige. Mom pressed the coffee tray flat against her stomach. "Your father has always helped both of you." It was such a polished sentence that I knew she had been saving it. "How much has he given me?" I asked. "This isn't a competition." I didn't say it was. "You're asking for a number, because Dad has one. He wrote it down. Dad stared at me. Where is the notebook? At the shop. It was the first direct lie I had told him in years. Put it back in my drawer. I need it to reconcile the accounts. There's nothing to reconcile. Then payroll should have been there. Mom sat beside him and pulled the paper bag closed with sharp little folds. Paige will be here tomorrow. We can all talk when your father is home. I turned to her. She's coming. She rearranged everything. Of course she had. Paige's presence required rearrangement. Mine required a parking space. I left before I said that aloud. Paige called me from the airport that evening. Mom said you ambushed Dad during occupational therapy. I asked him about your $68,000. Silence. Not surprise, not confusion, just silence. I leaned against the kitchen counter. You knew I'd find it eventually. Find what? Don't do that. I'm asking what you saw. Dad's notebook. She exhaled. Okay. That okay hurt more than a denial would have. How much did he tell you? She asked. He didn't have to tell me. His handwriting is very clear when he's hiding something. He wasn't hiding anything. Mom didn't know. Dad handles the business finances. I handle the business finances. You enter things. I straightened. Excuse me. I'm not insulting you. I'm saying Dad makes the final decisions, and I clean them up. Paige lowered her voice. The airport noise around her faded, which meant she had moved away from the gate. He offered to invest, she said. I didn't ask him to take it from payroll. I'm sure you specified that in the prospectus. It was not some random favor, Mara. I had clients. I had projections. You don't have the company anymore. The timing was bad. The business credit line is maxed out. I know. I gripped the edge of the counter. How do you know? Because Dad told me. When? A couple weeks ago. A couple weeks ago, I had been sitting across from Paige on a video call while she showed Mom the view from a rooftop bar. She had asked me whether I was still working too much. I had said yes, and she had laughed like it was a harmless habit. Were you planning to tell me? It wasn't my place. You made it my place the second I had to cover payroll. What do you mean, cover payroll? With my money. Another silence, different this time. How much? $14,000. Mara, why would you do that? I closed my eyes. There was no answer I could give that wouldn't sound insane outside our family, because 31 adults expected to be paid on Friday. Dad should have called me. Would you have sent the money? Yes. Do you have it? She hesitated half a beat too long. I can move things around. That's not what I asked. My flight is boarding. I can hear them calling Phoenix. Fine. I don't have $68,000 liquid right this second. How much do you have? I'm not discussing my personal finances while standing in an airport. Apparently, that's the only place anyone in this family can discuss anything. She sighed. I'm coming home to help. Can we not turn this into one of our old fights before I even land? I didn't know which old fight she meant. That was the advantage of being Paige. Every specific grievance became part of a vague historical conflict in which we were equally unreasonable. Dad came home Saturday afternoon. Mom decorated the front porch with a blue Welcome Home banner, and Paige arrived in a rental car wearing cream trousers that somehow survived air travel without wrinkling. She hugged Dad carefully. He held on longer than I expected. "There's my girl," he said. Mom cried. Paige cried. Dad made fun of both of them, then wiped his eyes when he thought no one was looking. I carried his suitcase inside. For an hour, we almost looked like a family that knew how to have one problem at a time. Paige arranged Dad's medications in a weekly container. Mom made sandwiches nobody ate. Dad sat in his recliner and complained that rehabilitation had destroyed his appetite while eating potato chips from the bag. Then his phone chimed. He glanced at the screen and handed it to me automatically. See what that is? Paige reached it first. It says your password was changed. What password? I asked. The bank. Dad looked at me. Did you change it? No. Paige was already tapping the screen. It may have forced a reset. Don't lock him out, I said. She gave me the little smile she used with people who were nervous around technology. I'm not going to lock him out. Within 20 minutes, she had his laptop open on the dining room table. Dad gave her every password he could remember. When one failed, Paige reset it. When a verification code arrived, she held out her hand for his phone, and he gave it to her. Mom stood behind Paige's chair, watching the screen as if air traffic were being safely landed. "This is what you do all day?" she asked. "More complicated versions of this." I couldn't make sense of any of it. Paige clicked through the accounts, her expression tightening. "There are automatic payments coming from 3 different places. Why?" "Ask Dad," I said. Dad pointed at me. "She set up most of them, because you told me to." Paige opened another window, and there are duplicate vendor profiles. One is for service, one is for equipment. That makes no sense. It does if you pay them. Mom touched Paige's shoulder. "Can you fix it?" Paige looked at the balances, then at our father. "Yes," she said, "but I'm going to need control of everything." "That's a terrible idea," I said. Paige didn't look up from the laptop. Control doesn't mean ownership, it means access. I know what the word means. Then what's the problem? The problem is, Dad gives you a password. You change 6 things, fly back to Chicago, and I'm the one standing at a supply counter explaining why his card won't work. Dad sat forward in the recliner. "Nobody's changing my cards. One of them is compromised," Paige said. "By who?" "Not compromised like stolen. Compromised like you've used the same password since 1998. It's a good password." Frank B. Dad stared at her. "How did you know that?" Paige turned the laptop so he could see the dots in the password field, which did not answer his question but seemed to satisfy him. Mom laughed too loudly. "Honestly, Frank, your password is Linda B.," he said. Mom stopped laughing. Paige pulled a yellow legal pad toward her and drew 3 columns. She had always been able to make control look like stationery. "We need to separate personal expenses from business expenses, cancel duplicate payments, freeze the cards you don't use, and decide who has authorization." "Mara," Dad said. It came so quickly that I looked at him. He rubbed his left thumb against the seam of the recliner. "Mara's already authorized." Paige's pen paused. "Fine, Mara and me." "You don't live here," I said. "I don't need to live here to monitor an account. You need to know why money is moving before you stop it." "I can ask." Dad doesn't answer. Dad lifted his good hand. "I'm sitting right here," Paige said. "Then we'll ask Dad. You've cracked the system." Mom stepped between us with the sandwich plate. "Can we please be grateful Paige came all this way?" Paige closed her eyes briefly. "Mom, don't. I'm just saying she dropped everything." "I didn't ask her to," I said. "No, Mara, you never ask. You just get angry that no one guessed." That landed cleanly. Mom was good at finding a piece of truth and using it like a tack. I picked up my purse and Dad's empty water glass. "I'm going to the shop." Dad glanced at the wall clock. "It's almost 5. "I know. You shouldn't be there alone at night." "I've been there alone every night this week," Paige said. "I'll come." "No. If I'm going to fix this, I need the records. Nothing at the shop fits into one of your columns. That's why it needs fixing." Dad made a low sound. Not quite a word, but enough to stop both of us. Fatigue had pulled one side of his face down again. Mom rushed to him, asking if he felt dizzy, while Paige reached for the blood pressure cuff. I stood there holding the water glass. Dad looked at me over Mom's shoulder. "Take her." So Paige came to the shop. She spent the drive adjusting the passenger seat and trying to connect her phone to my car. My 12-year-old Honda rejected her 3 times. "Your Bluetooth is hostile," she said. "It senses weakness." She almost smiled. For half a mile, it felt like we were 23 and 20 before every conversation became evidence. Then she looked out the window and said, "I didn't know you put your own money into payroll." "You said that already." "I'm saying, I wouldn't have let that happen." "You did let it happen." "I didn't know. You knew the business was short. I knew Dad was moving things around. That phrase is doing a lot of work." She pressed her lips together. "I'm sending your 14 back." "With what?" "Money, Mara." "Thank you for clarifying. I have an emergency fund." "So do I. Or I did." She turned toward me. You don't have to punish me for accepting help from our father. I'm not punishing you. This feels like punishment. That's because you're experiencing a consequence. The sentence sounded rehearsed even though it wasn't. I hated myself a little for enjoying how quiet it made her. At the shop, Ron was waiting beside his truck. He was 61, broad through the chest, with a gray mustache that made every expression look skeptical. He nodded at Paige. The famous one. Paige smiled, hopefully in a good way. Nobody specified. He handed me a folded work order. Frank quoted the McKinley job at cost. Materials alone eat the deposit. Why would he do that? Said he owed the guy. Does he? Ron shrugged. Frank thinks buying him a beer in 1987 means you're blood brothers. Paige held out her hand. Can I see? Ron looked at me before giving it to her. That tiny pause warmed me more than it should have. Paige studied the page. There's no customer ID. It's handwritten, I said. I see that. Dad quoted it from rehabilitation. Ron wrote it down over the phone. You accepted a job while he was in rehabilitation? Ron's eyebrows rose. I answered my phone. We can cancel it, Paige said. No, I said. The equipment is already ordered. You just said the deposit doesn't cover it. We'll adjust the final invoice or talk to Dad about what he promised. We're not doing work at a loss because Dad had a sentimental moment on painkillers. He wasn't on painkillers, I said. Ron said, that's the worrying part. Paige gave him the same controlled smile she had given me. Could you give us a minute? He looked at me again. It's okay, I said. Call if it isn't. He climbed into his truck and drove away. Paige watched his taillights. Your employees are very protective of you. They're Dad's employees. That's not what I said. Inside, I turned on the fluorescent lights. Paige stopped in the office doorway. Dad's desk held 3 stacks of invoices, a coffee mug full of pens, 2 calculators, and a small ceramic furnace Ron had given him as a joke. My desk was cleaner, but only because my mess lived in labeled drawers. Paige put down her bag. Where's the notebook? My work bag was under my desk, the black cover hidden beneath my cardigan. Why? If Dad kept off-book transfers, I need to reconcile them. Yesterday they were investments. They can be investments and still need to be reconciled. I'm doing that. With your phone calculator. I looked at her. She softened her voice. That was unfair. Yes. I'm trying to help. No. You're trying to arrive at the end. What does that mean? It means you want to solve the visible problem so everyone can be relieved you came. I need to understand what happened. We know what happened. Dad overextended. For you. Her face tightened. Not only for me. Then help me find the rest. For the next 4 hours, we worked. It was the most time we had spent alone together in years, and the strangest part was how good we were at it. Paige found 2 automatic insurance drafts from an account Dad claimed was inactive. I located a deposit recorded under the wrong customer. She built a spreadsheet with separate tabs for personal, operating, credit, and vendor balances. I explained why 3 suppliers with nearly identical names were not duplicates. At one point, she held up a statement. Why does the business pay Mom's gym membership? Because she says she talks us up in water aerobics. Has that generated leads? Mrs. Dombrowski bought a filter. Paige laughed so hard she snorted. We both froze. She had snorted when we were younger, usually right before Mom told us to settle down. Paige covered her mouth. Don't, she said. I didn't say anything. You were going to. I was going to say Mrs. Dombrowski bought the premium filter. That made it worse. Paige bent over the desk, laughing silently. Then the printer clicked, and the moment ended. By 10, she had found $6,700 sitting in a secondary account Dad had used for equipment rebates. It helped, but it didn't solve the credit line, the supplier balances, or the money due back to me. Paige pointed to the screen. We move this into operating, pause 2 personal drafts, and collect the larger receivables next week. That covers the immediate bills. Exactly. Not the debt. One thing at a time. That's what Dad says. She shut the laptop harder than necessary. Do you want me to help or confess? I want you to tell me what the $68,000 was for. I told you. My company. Which part? Operating expenses. Payroll? Yes. Office? Yes. Your apartment? No. She looked away. Paige. I paid myself a salary. That's normal. With Dad's money. With investment capital. Did you sign anything? She began stacking statements. We had an understanding. Did you give him projections? Yes. Did the projections say he would be repaid in September? They said the business would be profitable by September. It doesn't exist anymore. I'm aware. Her voice broke on the last word. Barely. Paige immediately cleared her throat and reached for another paper. I could have stopped. A decent sister might have. When did you know it was failing? She aligned the paper against the edge of the desk. Before Dad sent the money, the shop seemed to become louder around us. The old refrigerator humming, air moving through the ceiling vent, a truck changing gears on the road outside. Did he know? I told him it was a difficult quarter. That's not what I asked. He knew I needed time. And you knew he'd find the money. She looked at me then. I knew he believed in me. It was sincere. That was what made it unbearable. My phone buzzed on the desk. A bank notification showed a transfer of $14,000 into my account. Paige had sent it while we were working. She nodded toward the screen. You're paid back. I stared at the notification. She had done the right thing. Quickly, without making me ask twice. She had also reduced my entire objection to the one amount she could return. Thank you, I said. You don't sound grateful. I am grateful. You sound furious. I can do two things at once. Paige pushed back from the desk. Well, I can't. I'm exhausted. Before we left, she reset the business account password and added her phone for verification. She froze 2 cards, including the one Dad carried, and scheduled the rebate transfer. Her spreadsheet was clean, color-coded, and accurate within the limits of what she had chosen to include. There was no column for the notebook. Dad's card failed at the pharmacy the next morning. Mom called while I was brushing my teeth. Your father is standing at the counter being humiliated. Paige froze his card. She said it was compromised. Use another card. I only brought this one. Then asked Paige to unfreeze it. She's in the shower. I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, toothpaste foaming at the corner of my mouth. Mom, I'm 20 minutes away. It would take you 2 minutes on your phone. I don't have access anymore. That was not entirely true. I still had my authorization, but the password had changed, and verification now went to Paige. Mom became very quiet. Why would she do that? Because you wanted her to fix it. I heard Dad in the background say, "Give me the damn phone." Then the call ended. By lunchtime, Paige had restored his card, paid the pharmacy charge, moved the rebate money, and produced a list of every current account. Mom texted me a photograph of the spreadsheet with the message, "She's gotten everything under control." That evening, Dad insisted we have dinner together before Paige flew back to Chicago. Mom made meatloaf, because Dad said rehabilitation food had made him distrust anything that could be eaten with a spoon. I arrived with my work bag. Paige's spreadsheet was already on the dining room table beneath the brass chandelier. Dad sat at the head, turning his fork over in his hand. Mom poured wine and praised the neat columns, the canceled drafts, the recovered rebate money. Then she lifted her glass. "To Paige," she said, "for saving your father's accounts." Paige gave a modest little laugh. Mom looked straight at me. Thank God someone in this family understands money. I reached into my work bag and put Dad's original notebook down beside the spreadsheet. Paige went pale. Dad's fork stopped moving. Mom stared at the coffee ring on the cover. What is that supposed to mean? I opened to the yellow marked page. It means, I said, we're going to start with what Paige saved them from. Saved them from what? Mom asked. From the hole Dad dug getting Paige out of hers. Dad pushed his chair back, but the rug caught one leg. The scrape came out crooked and weak. Close that notebook. No, it's private. The notebook might be. The business account isn't. It's my business. Then why is my money in it? Mom's eyes moved between us. What money? The $14,000 I put in for payroll. You got that back, Paige said quickly. From Paige. Not from the business. I paid you back because I didn't want you involved. I looked at her. I was involved before I knew there was anything to be involved in. Mom set down her wine glass. Could somebody please explain this without talking in circles? I turned the notebook so she could read it. Dad reached for it. I slid it out of range. Mara. His voice had that old warning in it, but his hand trembled against the table. There was a time when the tremble would have ended the conversation. I would have made a joke, gotten him water, and found a safer subject. That night, I waited for him to steady his hand. I read the entries aloud. School, $12,400. Rent and bridge, $8,000. Condo, $21,500. Taxes, $14,750. Reset, $36,000. Consulting bridge, $68,000. Mom stared at Paige. What condo? Paige folded her napkin beside her plate. My condo. You told us the deposit came from your annual bonus. It mostly did. $21,500 is not a rounding error, Paige. I paid part of it back. How much? I asked. She didn't answer. Dad said, "This is exactly why I didn't tell anyone. You're taking 6 transactions spread across years and making them sound like some kind of scandal." No one said scandal, I said. I said whole. Your sister needed help. So did the company. The company is fine. You have $4,000 in operating, almost nothing in savings, and a maxed-out credit line. We moved the rebate money, Paige said. I looked at her. That was $6,700. It covered the immediate gap. Your spreadsheet covers this week. The notebook explains why there's a gap. Mom picked up the spreadsheet as though it might answer for her. Her lips moved while she read the balances. Numbers made her anxious, so Dad had spent their marriage giving her conclusions instead. We're fine. It's handled. Don't worry about it. She lowered the paper. Frank, did you take $68,000 from the company for Paige? I invested in her business. Without telling me? It wasn't household money. Mom gave a short laugh. You had me cancel the new kitchen counters because you said we needed to be conservative. We did need to be conservative. Apparently one of us did. Paige touched Mom's wrist. I didn't know about the counters. Mom pulled away from her. For one brief, ugly second, I felt vindicated. Mom was finally looking at Paige the way she looked at me when I disappointed her, as if disappointment were not an event but a character flaw. Then Mom looked at Dad's drawn face, at Paige's wet eyes, and finally at me. Why would you do this tonight? There it was. I almost admired the speed of it. Do what? Your father just came home from rehabilitation. Paige changed her flight and spent all weekend helping us. We were having one nice dinner. You were thanking her for fixing a problem she helped create. I was thanking her for helping her father. So was I. Every day for 15 years. Nobody raised a glass. Mom pressed her fingers to her forehead. This is not about getting thanked. You made the toast. Paige said quietly. Mara, stop. No, you don't get to manage the tone now. I'm trying to keep Dad from having another stroke. Dad slapped his palm on the table. It wasn't hard, but all 3 of us went silent. I made the decision, he said, me. Paige didn't steal anything. She didn't trick me. I offered the money because I believed in what she was building. I watched Paige's face. She looked down. Did you believe in it? I asked her. Yes, when he sent the 68. She kept her eyes on the folded napkin. I believed I could turn it around. That wasn't my question. You asked me this last night, and you said you knew it was failing. Mom looked sharply at her. You knew? Businesses have bad quarters, Mom. You said you were doing wonderfully. I was trying not to worry you. Dad scoffed. That's rich. Paige's head came up. What is that supposed to mean? You didn't mind worrying me. You offered. Because you called me crying from a parking garage. Her face changed. You promised you would never use that against me. I'm not using it against you. I'm telling them why I helped. No, you're making it sound like I manipulated you. I didn't say that. You didn't have to. For the first time all night, Paige and Dad were looking at each other instead of at me. The story they had built together had required both of them to play flattering roles. Dad was the father with absolute faith. Paige was the daughter worth betting on. Neither of them could tell the truth without taking something from the other. Mom stared down at her meatloaf. You called your father crying? Paige's laugh came out thin. Apparently we're sharing everything. You called him, not me. I knew you'd panic. I am your mother. That's why. Mom sat back as if Paige had pushed her. Dad pointed toward me. This is what you wanted, isn't it? Everybody hurting? I felt the words physically right below my ribs. No, you brought the notebook to the dinner table because you all brought the lie. What lie? Paige demanded. Mom said something rude to you. She does that to everyone. Mom said, thank you. You know what I mean. No, I don't believe I do. Paige waved one hand, frustrated. This is not about a toast. Mara found the notebook and decided every hard thing she's ever done was secretly my fault. I don't think that. You're acting like Dad handed me your life. He handed me the bill. I sent your money back. You sent back the one amount I could prove. The room went still. Paige's eyes hardened. There it is. What? You think I'm lying about repaying him? I asked how much you repaid. You didn't answer. I don't remember every transfer. Dad does. I tapped the notebook. That's the strange part. He wrote down every dollar going to you, but not much coming back. Dad leaned forward. She paid expenses directly. Which expenses? Things. I waited. Insurance, he said. A supplier invoice. There were others. Show me. I don't answer to you. No, you just use me when the answers stop working. Mom said my name the way someone might say enough in church. I flipped back several pages and found the entry I had marked with a strip of receipt paper. Dawson late, I read. Move personal if needed. Mara can float until clear. Dad's face drained of color. That was last summer. I covered $11,000 for 9 days because you told me a customer payment was delayed. Was it? Yes. Did any of that money go to Paige? I don't remember. Here's another one. Hold train until 15th. P needs closing. I spent a week apologizing to that supplier. Paige reached for the notebook. Let me see. I gave it to her. Dad made a sound of protest, but Paige was already reading. She turned one page, then another. Her expression changed as she moved backward through the years. Beside the school transfer, Dad had written, Tell L scholarship covered. Mom saw it over Paige's shoulder. What does L mean? She asked. No one answered. She took the notebook from Paige. The kitchen clock ticked 6 times before Mom spoke again. You told me Paige got a scholarship. She did, Dad said. It didn't cover everything. You said it covered everything. What difference would it have made if you knew? I might have wanted to know we were paying $12,000. It came from my account. We were married, Frank. We're still married, are we? Financially? He looked at his plate. Mom's anger frightened Dad in a way mine never had. Mine was operational. Mine could be redirected into a task. Mom's changed the temperature of his home. She closed the notebook and held it against her chest. Paige said, Mom, I'm sorry. For what part? All of it. That's not an answer. I'm sorry Dad lied. I'm sorry I let him. The admission cost her. I could see that. Mom could too, which was probably why she turned back to me. And what happens now? She asked. You've made your point. I haven't made a point. Then why bring this? Because tomorrow I'm not going to keep pretending the accounts are fine. Paige rubbed her temples. They're stabilized. No, they're arranged. What's the practical difference? Train is waiting on $43,000. Carrier is waiting on $19,000. The McKinley job is underquoted. 2 commercial customers are late, and Ron is expecting the raise Dad promised. Your spreadsheet doesn't include any of that. Then add it. I'm done adding things. Dad looked up. What does that mean? I had not planned to say it at dinner. I had imagined giving notice properly, printed and dated, across the desk at the shop. but there was something obscene about protecting the form of a job nobody had ever treated as a real job. It means I'm resigning. Mom's mouth opened. Dad laughed once. Don't be dramatic. I'm not. You don't resign from your family. I'm not resigning from the family. I'm resigning from Bennett's sons. Paige stared at me. You can't do that right now. Why? Dad can barely concentrate. You have control of everything. That's online access. I don't know the business. You told me it needed fixing. That doesn't mean I can run it. Dad's voice dropped. Mara, enough. I looked at him. His face was tired and frightened and furious. I loved him. That was the ugliest fact at the table, because love had always been the reason I stayed 5 minutes after enough. I'll prepare a handoff, I said. Passwords, payment calendar, contacts, open jobs. You can hire a bookkeeper, or Paige can manage it. I don't want a bookkeeper. Then choose Paige. Paige flinched. Dad held out his hand for the notebook. Mom gave it to him slowly. He placed it beside his plate and covered it with his palm. You walk out now, he said. Don't expect to walk back in when this blows over. I picked up my work bag. That's the problem, Dad. You still think my leaving is the part that blows over. Dad called before I reached the end of the block. I let it ring through the car speakers until the screen went dark. Then Mom called. Then Paige. At the red light, Dad called again. I answered. What? You took the supplier list. It's in the blue folder in my bottom desk drawer. Not that list, the one with cell numbers. It's in my phone. You can't take company property. Those are people I've known for years. They're business contacts. I'll put them in the handoff. He was quiet for a second. I could hear Mom moving dishes behind him. You're really going to behave this way? You told me not to expect to walk back in. I was angry. So was I. You don't make decisions angry. You make transfers while scared. Apparently, we all have our process. He hung up. I drove home with the radio off. At my apartment, I put my work bag on the kitchen table and stood there, still wearing my coat with nowhere urgent to be. It was a terrible feeling. For years, I had imagined what freedom from the shop would feel like. In those fantasies, I slept late. I took vacations without forwarding the business number. I ate lunch someplace that did not sell windshield fluid beside the register. I had never imagined freedom would feel like forgetting something important. I checked my phone. No missed calls. Then I checked the business email on my laptop. There was a message from a customer asking whether the crew would arrive Tuesday. A supplier had sent an overdue notice. Ron had forwarded a photo of a cracked condenser, housing with the subject line. Frank said, "Warranty?" My hands moved toward the keyboard. I stopped them. The cracked housing was probably covered. The serial number would confirm it. It would take me less than 3 minutes to answer, and Ron could schedule the replacement first thing. I closed the laptop. 30 seconds later, I opened it again and typed, "Please send this to Paige. She is managing account access and current operations during the transition." I copied Paige, then removed myself from the thread. It felt petty. It also felt like breathing through a straw. Paige knocked on my door at 11:23. She had changed out of her cream trousers and was wearing jeans, sneakers, and one of Dad's old Ohio State sweatshirts. The sleeves stopped above her wrists. She held the container of leftover meatloaf. "Mom made me bring you this." "I don't want it." "I don't want it either." We looked at the container. "Dad ate 2 servings," she said. "Stress gives him an appetite." "Can I come in?" I stepped aside. Paige put the meatloaf in my refrigerator without asking, then stood in my kitchen like she had arrived for a meeting and misplaced the agenda. "You can't leave tomorrow," she said. "I'm not disappearing. I'll do a handoff." "How long?" "Through Friday." Her eyebrows went up. 5 days? 4, technically. "Mara, I'm not staying 2 weeks so everybody has time to pretend I changed my mind. What am I supposed to do Friday? Hire someone. Dad won't. Then you manage it. I have a job." I leaned against the counter. "So did I. You know what I mean." She looked down at her hands. Her nails were short and unpolished, which surprised me. Paige usually looked completed. "I'm not qualified to run an HVAC company," she said. "I'm not qualified to run an HVAC company. You've done it for 15 years. I've run the office. Dad ran the company. Did he? That stopped me." Paige looked toward the dark window above my sink. "I spent 4 hours with him after you left. He couldn't explain half the contracts. He kept saying, 'You knew.' I do know. Exactly. That doesn't obligate me forever." "No. But 4 days is—" She searched for a word that did not sound like accusation. Aggressive. So was changing every password. I thought I was helping. You were. Dad's card failed exactly once. She gave me a tired look. I deserved that. "Yes. Could you stop being right for 5 minutes? Probably not tonight." To my surprise, she laughed. Then she covered her face with both hands. What a disaster. I watched her shoulders shake once and thought she might be crying. When she lowered her hands, her eyes were dry. "Did Dad show you the rest of the notebook?" I asked. "No. He took it upstairs." "To the bedroom?" "Mom told him she didn't want it in their room." "Where did he put it?" "In the linen closet." I pictured Dad hiding financial evidence between bath towels. It was so perfectly him that I almost smiled. Paige leaned back against the opposite counter. "I didn't know he was using your money. You knew he was delaying bills. I knew he was tight. You knew he took from the credit line. For the company. For you. For an investment he chose to make." I folded my arms. She shook her head. "I'm not doing this again. You came to my apartment. I came because you're about to blow up your life to make a point. My life is already built around his company. You make a good salary. I make $63,000. Paige blinked. "That's all?" I laughed. I couldn't help it. "I thought Dad paid you more." "Why?" "Because you do everything." "Interesting." "Don't make that face." "What face?" "The face where you win silently." "I don't feel like I'm winning." She rubbed the cuff of Dad's sweatshirt between her fingers. "I'll stay through Friday. I move my meetings online." That was fast. Mom cried in the laundry room. That usually speeds things up. She feels lied to. She was lied to. She also feels like you enjoyed telling her. I stared at Paige. "Did you tell her that?" "No." She told me. "Of course. I said I didn't think you enjoyed it." That surprised me enough that I didn't answer. Paige went to the door, then turned back. "I did make payments." "How much?" "About $18,000 over the years. Some went directly to Dad, some expenses I covered for them. Do you have records?" "Probably." "Find them." Her mouth tightened, but she nodded. After she left, I took the meatloaf out of the refrigerator and ate it cold over the sink. At 8 the next morning, I printed my resignation letter on Bennett's Son's stationery. The letter was only 6 sentences. I spent 40 minutes choosing between effective Friday and effective at the close of business. Friday. I chose the second because the first sounded like I might not come in. Dad's truck was not in its usual spot. His doctor had barred him from driving for a month, an instruction Dad considered both insulting and negotiable. Paige's rental car was parked across 2 spaces. I found her in the office with Ron and Denise, our dispatcher. Denise was 57, wore purple reading glasses on a beaded cord, and could reduce an angry customer to an apology without raising her voice. Paige had put my payment calendar on the conference table. Denise tapped one square. "You can't move this maintenance billing to the 1st. "Why not? Because half those clients close their books on the 28th. That doesn't make sense." "No," Denise said. "It does not. And yet they continue." Ron spotted me. "Tell Chicago we can't cancel McKinley." Paige looked up. "Good morning to you, too." I put my bag on my chair. "We can't cancel McKinley." "Why?" "Because Dad gave his word, the equipment is ordered, and Mr. McKinley refers 3 or 4 jobs a year. So we take a loss forever because he has friends? We correct the final labor allowance and accept a smaller margin." Ron nodded. "That's what I said. You said Frank would haunt us. That was my supporting argument." Paige looked at me. "Can you explain the payment calendar?" "Yes." Her shoulders lowered with relief. "For the handoff." I added. They rose again. Denise looked between us. What handoff? I gave Paige the resignation letter first. She read the top line and stopped. You said Friday. It says Friday. I thought we were discussing it. We did. Ron took off his cap and scratched the line where it had flattened his hair. Frank fire you? No. Then who did? I resigned. Denise sat down. Ron stayed standing. Paige placed the letter flat on the table. Dad hasn't seen this. I'll give him a copy. He'll say no. It isn't a request. Ron looked at the letter but didn't touch it. You got another job? No. Win the lottery? No. Joining a cult? Do they offer dental? Some of the good ones. Denise didn't smile. Is the company closing? No. Dad will hire a bookkeeper or Paige will manage the office while he recovers. Both of them looked at Paige. I'm helping with the financial cleanup, she said. Ron put his cap back on. That was not the question. I spent the morning building the handoff. I documented every recurring payment, every account, every vendor preference, and every strange exception Dad had turned into policy. I listed open receivables and underquoted jobs. I wrote down which customers needed paper invoices because email frightened them, and which supplier representative would extend terms if asked before the due date instead of after. At 11, a message came from Train saying our account would go on credit hold unless we paid $23,000 by Wednesday. Paige read it over my shoulder. Call them. I'm writing the contact into the handoff. Mara, we need equipment for scheduled jobs. I know, so call. I turned in my chair. What are you asking me to do? Your job. Through Friday, my job is transition. Transition includes keeping the company functioning. It includes telling you how. Call Evan. Explain that Frank had a medical emergency. Offer $12,000 Wednesday and the balance in 2 weeks. Will he accept that? Probably. He might ask for 15. Can you call with me? The question was quieter. I called Evan and put him on speaker. I introduced Paige as the person managing accounts during Dad's recovery, then let her make the request. She stumbled once, recovered, and got him to accept $13,000. When the call ended, she smiled despite herself. That went well. You did fine. You helped. I introduced you. You knew exactly what he'd accept. That's what the handoff is for. My phone rang. Dad. I answered on speaker without warning Paige. He said, Your mother says you wrote some kind of letter. Yes. You're not quitting. I am. You're upset. I'm also employed at will. Paige winced. Dad's breathing grew louder. Put your sister on. She's right here. Paige leaned toward the phone. Hi, Dad. Tell her this is ridiculous. Paige looked at me, then at the resignation letter. No, she said. Dad went silent. Paige swallowed. She shouldn't have to be trapped here because we don't know what she knows. For 1 second, I forgot how to breathe. Then Dad said, I knew you'd take her side. The call ended. Paige stared at the dark phone screen. Congratulations, I said softly. You've been me for 12 seconds. Paige stared at me for another second, then pushed my phone across the desk. I don't enjoy it. You're not supposed to. That's how the system protects itself. Please don't turn this into a sociology lecture. I was being supportive. You're bad at it. So are you. Denise made a point of gathering papers at the other end of the table. Ron walked out muttering something about checking a compressor, though the nearest compressor was in the warehouse. Paige sat in Dad's chair. She realized it immediately and stood again. You can sit there, I said. I don't want him walking in and seeing me. He's not supposed to drive. He has Mom. Mom won't bring him here while she's angry. She brought him a sandwich this morning and cut it diagonally. That's not forgiveness. That's geometry. Paige laughed, but her eyes stayed on the resignation letter. For the rest of Monday, I taught her how the company actually moved money. Dad believed the business operated on completed jobs, issued invoices, and sensible 30-day terms. In reality, it operated on Denise remembering which property manager lost bills unless she copied his assistant, Ron knowing which commercial customer needed to see a technician's notes before paying, and me calling people 3 days before a problem became embarrassing. Paige kept trying to replace judgment with rules. If invoices are due in 30 days, collections should start on day 31. Call Foster Mechanical on day 31, and they'll make us wait 60 out of spite. That's irrational. Yes. So when do you call? Day 26. Ask how Phil's golf tournament went, then mention the invoice while he still feels guilty about spending Friday afternoon golfing. She wrote that down. You're not actually putting golf tournament in the procedure manual. I'm documenting institutional knowledge. You're documenting gossip. Same thing with better formatting. Around 2, Dad's business card declined at a gas station. He called Paige, not me. I could hear him through her phone from across the office. What the hell did you do now? The card is active, Paige said. Which one are you using? The blue one. You have 4 blue cards, the regular blue one. What are the last 4 digits? If I could see the little numbers, I wouldn't be asking you. Paige pinched the bridge of her nose. Is Mom with you? Why? She can read me the number. I'm not involving your mother every time I buy gas. You're in her car. There was a pause. That is not the point, Dad said. Paige eventually discovered he was trying to use one of the cards she had frozen. Mom had taken him to physical therapy, and he had insisted they stop for gas so he could feel useful. Paige unfroze the card, waited while he paid, then froze it again. He has 3 working cards, she said after hanging up. He likes that one. Why? It has a higher limit. He was buying $30 of gas. He likes potential. At 4, she found a recurring payment to a storage facility and marked it for cancellation. Don't, I said. What do we store? Old equipment manuals, tax records, and a furnace Dad removed from a church in 1996 because he thinks the heat exchanger might be historically significant. That sentence became less reasonable as it continued. The tax records are real. We can move them here. Where? She looked around the office. Every cabinet was full. Fine, she said. Storage stays. On Tuesday, Paige arrived before me with coffee from the place near her hotel. Mine had oat milk, which I had never requested in my life. You drink oat milk, she said. I don't. You did in Chicago. That was 6 years ago when you ordered for me. She looked at the label. So, this has been built on a false premise, like so many things. She took my coffee and handed me hers. At 9, the McKinley equipment arrived. At 9:15, Mr. McKinley called to say Dad had promised him a higher efficiency unit than the one on the work order. At 9:20, Paige said, "We should cancel." Ron said, "You keep using that word like the equipment disappears. We can return it with a restocking fee, which is less than taking a loss." Except Frank promised the guy. Paige turned to me. "What would you do?" It was the first time she had asked before deciding. "I'd go see Mr. McKinley." Why? Because he's harder to disappoint in person. That sounds manipulative. It's customer service. We drove together. Mr. McKinley was 70, lived alone in a brick ranch house, and had known Dad since they worked summer construction jobs in their 20s. He had a hearing aid that whistled when he became agitated. He met us at the garage wearing a Bennett Sons cap older than Paige. Frank said 97%, he told me. Frank was mistaken. Frank doesn't make mistakes about furnaces. Paige made a noise that could have been a cough. I explained the price difference. Mr. McKinley crossed his arms. The hearing aid began to whistle. Then Paige stepped in. "I can honor what my father quoted," she said, "but I want you to understand he'd be paying part of the cost himself." Mr. McKinley's face changed. "Frank's sick? He had a stroke. I know that. He called me." "From rehabilitation?" Said the nurses were running a racket with the pudding. I closed my eyes. Paige continued. "His concentration has been affected. We're reviewing some decisions." Mr. McKinley looked down at the cracked concrete. He told me not to mention the stroke. "That sounds like him," I said. In the end, he accepted the lower efficiency unit and agreed to a revised labor price. Before we left, he took off the old company cap and gave it to Paige. "Tell Frank I said he's an idiot." "He knows," she said. In the car, she held the cap on her lap. "That went well," I said. He looked embarrassed. He was worried he'd taken advantage of Dad. I made him feel guilty. "You told him the truth. Is that what you call it when you choose the part of the truth that gets the result you want?" I glanced at her. "You really have been paying attention." She looked out the window, but she smiled. Mom's silence lasted until Wednesday afternoon. She texted me a photo of Dad asleep in his recliner with the television remote balanced on his chest. No message. I stared at the picture until my screen went dark. Then she sent, "He's exhausted." I typed 3 replies and deleted them. Finally, I wrote, "His therapy schedule is on the refrigerator. Make sure he drinks water." Her answer came immediately. "I know how to take care of my husband." I put my phone face down. At the shop, Paige was trying to explain to a customer that a maintenance agreement did not include repairing damage caused by raccoons. "They're not listed as an exclusion," the customer said through the speaker. Paige looked at me desperately. I shook my head. She muted the call. "What do I say?" "Ask whether the raccoon is still inside." "Why?" "Because Ron charges extra for live wildlife." She unmuted. "Is the raccoon still in the unit?" The answer was yes. Ron left 10 minutes later carrying a welding blanket and a broom. He stopped by my desk on the way out. "Friday's real?" "Yes." He adjusted his cap. "Frank, no. He has my letter. He believes it?" "No." Ron nodded as though that was what he expected. "You leaving town?" "No." "Good. Denise and I would like to continue having lunch with you, provided you don't get weird. I'll try. We don't want a speech about new chapters. You'll get no chapters. Maybe appetizers. Those are acceptable." He walked out. I had known Ron for 14 years. He had attended my 35th birthday dinner, replaced my garbage disposal for the cost of parts, and once refused to speak to me for 2 days because I changed the brand of shop coffee. Dad called him an employee when money was involved, and family when extra work was involved. I wondered what Ron called me when I wasn't there. Dad came to the shop Thursday. Mom drove, but he entered alone, wearing khakis and one of the button-down shirts I had brought to rehabilitation. He had buttoned it unevenly. Paige noticed first and moved toward him. He brushed her hand away. "I can dress myself." "No one said you couldn't. You were reaching. I was going to hug you. You don't hug me at the office." Paige stopped. Dad went into his office and closed the door. My office phone rang. I looked through the glass wall at him. He pointed to the receiver. I answered. "Seriously? Come in here. You could wave." I did. Inside, the black notebook sat on his desk. Dad pointed at the visitor chair. I remained standing. He looked better than he had at dinner. Angrier, too, which was probably related. "I'll raise you to 75, he said. 1,000? "No, dollars a week." "Yes, 1,000. That's not the issue. It's part of the issue. Only because you were underpaying me." His mouth flattened. "You agreed to the salary. I also agreed to cover emergencies. I agreed to answer after hours. I agreed to put money in temporarily. Every separate thing sounded reasonable. You're valuable. I'm acknowledging that. Because I resigned. Because I had a stroke and got a wake-up call." I looked at him. "Did the stroke tell you to repay me?" I said, "Paige repaid you. The business owes me other money." "What other money?" I took a folder from my bag and placed it beside the notebook. Inside was a list of personal expenses I had covered over 5 years. Property taxes during a slow season, their furnace materials, a business insurance shortfall, deposits Dad had called temporary. Some he had partially repaid. Some Mom had converted into gifts by thanking me warmly enough. The balance was $18,920. Dad read the total, then looked up. "You're charging us for the furnace." "I paid for the equipment. I installed it. Ron installed it. I supervised. You were in Florida." His cheek twitched. "Families don't invoice each other. You kept a ledger on Paige." That was different. Everything is different when it's her. He pushed the folder back. I can't pay this now. I know. There's a proposed schedule on the second page. You made me a payment plan? Yes. I'm your father. You're also the person who taught me to write down what people owe. He glanced at the black notebook. You think that thing proves I don't love you? He said. No, I think it proves you were counting on me. Same thing in a family. No, Dad, it really isn't. His eyes filled so quickly I almost missed it. He blinked, looked toward the office window, and became interested in Paige rearranging folders outside. I counted on you because you don't fall apart, he said. The old praise moved toward me, looking for its usual place to land. I stepped aside. Then you should be able to survive me leaving. On Friday at 5, I handed Paige the keys, the final contact list, and a sealed copy of the repayment schedule for Dad. She looked down at the ring in her palm. What happens Monday? You open the door. And then? People tell you what's broken. What do I do? I picked up my work bag. The part nobody taught me, I said. You decide. Monday morning, I woke at 5:42 without an alarm. For years, I had arrived at the shop before 7 on Mondays because Dad liked to hold a crew meeting at 7:30 and begin it by asking me for numbers he could have requested Friday. My body did not care that I had resigned. At 6:15, I was dressed, caffeinated, and standing in my kitchen with my purse over my shoulder. I took it off. At 6:40, I put it back on and drove to a diner across town so I would not accidentally turn toward Bennett Sons. The waitress called me honey, refilled my coffee 4 times, and never asked why I spent 2 hours reading the same page of a paperback. At 8:11, my phone rang. Dad. I watched it ring. A minute later, he called again. On the third call, I answered. What happened? Nothing happened. Then why are you calling 3 times? I need the payroll service number. It's in the handoff. I'm at home. The handoff is at the shop. Your sister isn't answering. She's probably driving. I told her to get there by 7. She has the keys. She can arrive when she wants. That's not how a business works. I looked around the diner. The man in the next booth was putting hot sauce on scrambled eggs with deep concentration. The number is on the payroll website, I said. What's the website? In the handoff. Mara. The waitress appeared with the coffee pot. I shook my head. Dad, call Denise. I don't want to bother Denise. I almost laughed. Denise is at the office. It's her job. You know it off the top of your head. I do. Then give it to me. No. Silence filled the line. You're withholding company information? I documented it, printed it, saved it to the shared drive, and handed it to Paige. I'm asking one simple question. There will always be one simple question. This is childish. I have to go. Where? It was such a dad question. If I was not going to the shop, my location required justification. Breakfast. You don't eat breakfast. I'm branching out. I hung up and ordered pancakes. At 9:20, Paige texted, Where is the payroll number? I replied, Section 2, page 4. She sent back, Found it. No guilt, no accusation. I appreciated that more than I wanted to. At 10:14, Does Summit Properties always pay late? Found it. At 11:38, What does call Gary before draft mean? Call Gary before the automatic draft. I know what the words mean. Why? Ask Gary. There was a 3-minute pause. He asked me not to draft until Thursday. There you go. At 1, she sent a photo of Dad's ceramic furnace with the question, Why is this on his desk? Sentimental value. It's hideous, correct? I smiled at my phone, then caught myself. That afternoon, I updated my resume. The first version made me sound like a receptionist with unusually aggressive hobbies. The second made Bennett Sons sound like a multinational corporation whose North American operations I had personally rescued. I settled somewhere in the middle. Managed payroll for 31 employees, oversaw vendor accounts and receivables, coordinated field scheduling, billing, purchasing, customer retention, and the emotional weather of one stubborn founder. I deleted the last item, though it was the skill I had practiced most. By Wednesday, Mom had found 3 reasons to call. The first was Dad's physical therapy copay, which had been charged twice. Call the billing number, I said. They keep putting me on hold. They do that to everyone. You know what to say. I say the same thing you would. No, you have a voice. I certainly do. She did not laugh. The second call was about the dishwasher making a grinding sound. I gave her the number of an appliance repair company. Your father can look at it, she said. Dad repairs furnaces. He understands machines. Then why are you calling me? The third was because she could not find the password for their utility account. I wrote it in the blue book, she said. Which blue book? The one you gave us. I didn't give you a blue book. You set it up. I set up a password manager on Dad's phone. I don't like that thing. Then reset the password. What if I lock us out? Then call the utility company. She went quiet. You sound very cold. I closed my laptop. I'm trying to answer the question you asked. You know this is hard for us. I do. Your father keeps waiting for you to come by. He told me not to. He was upset. So was I. That dinner got out of control. No. The dinner was the first time anyone admitted what was happening. We could have discussed it privately. We were in your dining room. You know what I mean. I did. Privately meant in a way that allowed everyone to deny it later. Mom exhaled. Are you coming Sunday? What Sunday? Dinner. You didn't invite me. I'm inviting you now. Is Paige coming? She had to go back to Chicago. The timing answered more than Mom meant it to. I have plans, I said. What plans? Lunch with Ron and Denise. That's lunch. It may be a long lunch. Mara, I'm not ready. Her voice cooled. Your father may not always be here when you decide you are. It was the kind of sentence Mom could deliver softly and leave bleeding on the carpet. I know, I said. Neither will I. I hung up before she could answer. Lunch with Ron and Denise was at a Mexican restaurant near the shop. Ron ordered something labeled El Grande and then complained about the size. Denise kept watching me. What? I asked. You look rested. That sounds accusatory. It is. I resent it. Ron pointed his fork at me. Chicago color-coded the truck keys. By technician? I asked. By day. I frowned. Why? Exactly. Denise stirred salsa into her rice. She's trying. How's payroll? Both of them stopped eating. I set down my glass. What? Probably fine, Denise said. What does probably mean? The processor flagged the bank change. Paige sent the verification, but the release didn't happen this morning. Checks are due tomorrow. We know. Did she call account support? Yes. Did they escalate it? Ron said, You are doing the face. What face? The one where you leave lunch and fix payroll. I reached for my purse, then stopped. Denise laid her hand over the check before I could take it. She has a confirmation number. They say funds will release by 3. And if they don't, Paige has a backup. What backup? She didn't say. My phone was already in my hand. Ron leaned back. We didn't tell you so you'd fix it. Why did you tell me? Because you asked. I looked at the shop across the parking lot. The Bennett Sons vans were lined up along the fence. One had the rear door open. Someone had left a coil of copper tubing on the asphalt, and from where I sat, I could practically hear Dad shouting about theft. What do you need from me? I asked. Denise considered the question. Nothing yet. It was harder than hearing they needed everything. At 2:47, Ron texted, Released, everybody gets paid. I typed, Thank God, deleted it, and sent a thumbs up. Paige called at 5. Did Ron tell you? She asked. He said payroll released. He made it sound like I almost destroyed civilization. Payroll makes people dramatic. I was on the phone for 6 hours. That sounds right. 6 hours, Mara. I heard you. I had 3 meetings for my actual job, so do them tonight. I have been doing them at night. I sat on my couch and pulled my feet under me. You asked what happened after Monday. I did not ask to do 2 jobs indefinitely. Neither did I. You weren't working 2 jobs. I waited. She caught it herself. Fine. You were doing multiple jobs within 1 job for $63,000. You're never going to let me forget that, are you? I forgot it for years. It's your turn to remember. Paige made a frustrated sound. Dad called the processor after I did and confused them. He told one person I wasn't authorized. Are you? Yes. I uploaded the form. Did Dad sign it? He signed it Saturday. Does he remember? No. That answer came without irritation, just fatigue. Call Malcolm, I said. His therapist? Dad respected him. Ask Malcolm to explain that memory problems are part of recovery and that fighting every safeguard isn't proof he's fine. That's useful. It's also in the handoff under Frank. You gave Dad his own section? It was the longest one. She laughed, then went quiet. I found your list, she said. What list? The money Dad owes you. That was for him. He left it on his desk. Of course he did. $18,920. Yes. You paid their property taxes? During the slow season. Why didn't Mom know? Dad said he'd tell her, and you believed him? I believed he'd repay me before telling her became necessary. Did he? You've seen the total. Paige was silent for so long I checked the screen to make sure the call had not ended. I thought you stayed because you liked being needed, she said. The honesty of it took my breath. Sometimes I did. I thought you made it your whole identity. Sometimes I did that too. Then how was I supposed to know you resented it? I stood and carried my water glass to the kitchen. I didn't need you to know I resented it. I needed you to know it was happening. You never told me. You never asked how Dad could always afford to save you. Her voice sharpened. We're back to that. We never left it. She hung up. At 7:30, someone knocked. I assumed it was a neighbor. When I opened the door, Paige stood in the hallway with her suitcase. I thought you went back to Chicago. I did. You flew here again? I drove. I have clothes at Mom's. She looked exhausted. There were gray shadows under her eyes, and her blouse was buttoned wrong near the bottom. What happened? Train wants the rest of the payment Monday. One commercial customer disputed an invoice. Dad promised 2 technicians different on-call bonuses, and neither is in payroll. Mom keeps asking me whether I've apologized to you. My boss asked how long my family emergency is going to last. I stepped back to let her in. She did not move. I can't do this, she said. It was not dramatic. It was barely louder than the hallway air conditioner. For years, that sentence had been Paige's exit and my assignment. I waited for the old response to rise in me. I'll handle it. Instead, I said, I know. Her face crumpled with anger. That's it? What do you want me to say? Come back? No. Just until Dad's better? No. Then what am I supposed to do? You can hire someone. You can make Dad face the debt. You can tell Mom the truth. You can repay what you borrowed. That doesn't fix Monday. No, Monday is just Monday. She stared at me like I had abandoned her somewhere dangerous. Maybe I had. Then she picked up her suitcase and walked past me into the apartment. If I'm staying here tonight, she said, I'm eating your yogurt. It might be bad. Of course it might. She opened the refrigerator, saw the container on the middle shelf, and looked back at me. You still have the meatloaf? Apparently none of us knows how to throw anything away. Paige took the meatloaf out, peeled back one corner of the plastic lid, and sniffed. You first, she said. I already ate some. When? Sunday night. It's Thursday. It was cooked Sunday. So this is a longevity test. She put it back and ordered Thai food. While we waited, she opened her laptop at my kitchen table. I thought she was checking work email until she rotated the screen toward me. A bank statement filled the display. 3 transfers to Dad were highlighted. $4,000 in 2019, she said. 6 in 2021. 8 last year. The 18 you mentioned. Yes. Did Dad deposit them into the business? I sent them to his personal account. Why? Because that's where he told me to send them. I scrolled through the statement. What were they for? The first was repayment for school. The second was supposed to go toward the condo money. The 8 was just money they needed. Mom and Dad? Dad said the property tax account was short. I leaned back. That was the same year I had paid the property taxes. Did he say how short? About $8,000. I got my folder from the bedroom and found the entry. The county payment had been $7,860. Dad had asked me for the full amount. Paige's transfer arrived 12 days earlier. He collected it twice, she said. Or he used yours for something else. What? Pick a bill. Paige stared at the two records side by side. Why would he do that? Because something was always about to clear. That doesn't answer the question. It answered it for me for years. The food arrived. We ate noodles from cartons at the table with the laptop between us. Paige kept going back to the statements. I thought I was paying him back. You were, but not the business. No. So on his notebook, it looks like I paid nothing. It looks like he didn't record what came back. Convenient. The word had an edge I had never heard her use about Dad. I picked a piece of basil from my noodles. He probably wasn't trying to frame you. He just kept a detailed history of everything I owed and a vague memory of everything I paid. That's how Dad organizes guilt. Incoming and outgoing use different systems. Paige closed the laptop. I hate that notebook. I know. You enjoyed putting it on the table. It wasn't a question. For about 3 seconds, I said. She looked surprised. I enjoyed Mom realizing she had been wrong about me, I said. Then she was hurt. Dad looked sick. You looked terrified. And somehow I was still the person who had ruined dinner. You did ruin dinner. I know. We could have talked privately. I gave her a look. Fine, she said. We probably wouldn't have. The next morning, Paige left before 7. She put a note beside the coffee maker. Yogurt is bad. I have saved your accounts from yogurt. At 9, a recruiter called about my resume. Her name was Simone, and she represented a regional building services company looking for an operations manager. I had applied at 2 in the morning, mostly because their job description read like a list of things I did while eating lunch. Simone asked how many field employees I had supported. 31. How large was your office team? I pictured Denise, me, Dad, when he felt supervisory, and the chair where Paige had sat for 5 days, 2 full-time plus the owner, and you managed payroll, purchasing, receivables, and dispatch coordination. Yes. Who handled vendor negotiations? I did. Process improvement? I did. Escalated customer issues? I did. She paused. What did the owner handle? Furnaces. I expected her to laugh. Instead, she said, It sounds like your title understated your scope. I had heard some version of that from Paige, Ron, and even Dad after I resigned. From a stranger, it felt less like comfort and more like evidence. Simone named a salary range that began $22,000 above what Dad had offered to raise me to. I wrote it on the back of an envelope to make sure I had heard correctly. Would that align with your expectations? She asked. I looked at the number. Yes, I said, then worried I had answered too quickly. She scheduled a video interview for Monday. After the call, I walked around my apartment. I made the bed. I unmade it because I had trapped the top sheet crooked. I opened the refrigerator, saw the meatloaf, and threw it away. Mom called at noon. Your sister says you're making her stay at your apartment. I didn't make her do anything. She has a perfectly good room here. She said Dad wakes her at 5 to ask account questions. He wakes up early. She doesn't. Mom sighed. He feels rejected by both of you. I resigned from a job. Paige slept at my apartment. That's a very technical way to describe what's happening. It was a technical job. You think you're funny. Sometimes. She became quiet. I heard a cabinet close. Your father took your repayment schedule to the bank, she said. My stomach tightened. Why? He wanted to see if he could move money. From where? I don't know. He didn't tell me. Mom, don't let him borrow more to repay me. I don't let your father do things. You told me I let him work too much. I apologized for that. No, you corrected the wording. Her breath caught. I regretted it immediately, not because it was false, but because she sounded tired. He showed me the list, she said. The furnace, the taxes, the insurance. Okay. I didn't know. I know. Why didn't you tell me? The question was so close to the one she had asked Paige that I almost missed the difference. Dad said he would. You're an adult. So is Paige. This isn't about Paige. Everything becomes not about Paige right before you explain why I should have done better. Mom's voice hardened. You could have said no. Yes. You always act as if we forced you. No. I'm trying to understand why saying yes meant it was acceptable to keep asking. We're your parents, and I helped you. Now you want payment. Yes. She breathed out slowly. Your father says families don't invoice each other. He kept Paige's numbers in a notebook. I'm aware of the notebook, Mara. Then you understand. No, I understand that your father was wrong to hide things. I do not understand why you're using his mistake to rewrite every kind thing you ever did for us as exploitation. I sat down on the edge of the couch. I'm not. It feels that way. I'm still glad I helped when you needed it. I'm not glad Dad used my help to avoid telling either of us the truth. Mom did not answer. I don't want interest, I said. I don't want everything immediately. I want him to sign the schedule and stop treating my money like it returned to the family by gravity. He's ashamed. So am I. What do you have to be ashamed of? It was the first gentle thing she had said, that I kept doing it and called it competence. Mom's voice softened. You are competent. I know. She tried to laugh, but it broke in the middle. On Monday, I wore a navy blouse for the video interview and positioned my laptop so the recruiter could not see the laundry drying on a rack behind me. The operations director was a woman named Camille who asked what I did when the owner made verbal promises that conflicted with standard pricing. I said, I document the exception, calculate the long-term value of the relationship, and explain the cost before the promise becomes policy. What if the owner continues? In my previous position, I absorbed the consequences. Camille waited. I wouldn't recommend that as a process, I added. She smiled. Good answer. Halfway through the interview, my phone lit up with 6 calls. Dad, Paige, Dad again, the shop number. Ron, Paige. I turned the phone face down. Camille asked how I handled competing emergencies. I determine which one is actually mine. The answer came easier than it would have a week earlier. When the interview ended, I checked the messages. Dad, call me. Paige, don't call Dad yet. Dad, your sister is making decisions she doesn't understand. Ron, Frank is here. Paige, I'm handling it. Dad, call me now. I called Paige. She answered in the warehouse, her voice echoing. Before you say anything, I have it under control. What's happening? Dad took a car service here because Mom hid the keys. That sounds under control. He found the proposal from the bookkeeper. You found someone? Temporary contract. She can start Wednesday. That's good. Dad told her to leave. Why? He said no outsider is going through his books. Did he use the phrase family business? 4 times. In the background, something metal hit the floor. Paige lowered her voice. He thinks you're coming back. I'm not. I know. Do you? Yes. The answer was immediate. What do you need from me? I asked. Nothing. I called because I wanted to warn you before he did. I looked at my interview notes spread across the coffee table. Thank you. Dad's voice carried faintly through her phone. Ask Mara who she thinks can replace her. Paige raised hers. A trained professional, apparently. Don't shout at him, I said. He's shouting at me. I know, I heard. You're doing the thing. What thing? Protecting him while pretending you've stopped. I went quiet. Paige exhaled. Sorry. No. You're right. Dad shouted again, too muffled to understand. What are you going to do? I asked. Bring the bookkeeper back. He'll fight you. I know. He might revoke your access. I know. Mom might blame you. I know, Mara. This time, the words did not sound like surrender. They sounded like she was picking up weight with her knees bent. I heard her walk back into the office. Dad, she said, her voice calmer, Mara isn't coming back. I'm hiring Allison for 30 days. You can't hire anybody. You authorized me to manage the accounts. I can unauthorize you. Then you can explain to payroll why the bank changed again. You girls are treating me like I'm incompetent." "No," Paige said. "We're treating you like someone who had a stroke and hit $160,000 in transfers." Silence followed. I should have hung up. Instead, I stayed on the line like a person listening outside a closed door. Dad's voice was smaller when he said, "That money is none of their business." Paige answered, "It became their business when you made Mara cover it." Then she ended the call. I sat very still. A minute later, she texted, "Allison starts Wednesday." I replied, "Good." 3 dots appeared, vanished, then returned. "Did your interview go okay?" I looked at the salary range on the envelope. "Yes." "Good," she wrote. Then, after another pause, "Don't tell Mom yet. She'll plan your retirement dinner. I received the offer on Thursday afternoon." Camille called while I was buying toothpaste and asked whether I had time to discuss next steps. I abandoned my basket beside a display of allergy medicine and took the call near the automatic doors. The company wanted me to start in 2 weeks as operations manager for its Central Ohio service division. The salary was $88,000 with health insurance, a retirement match, and something called discretionary time off. "What does discretionary mean?" I asked. "It means we trust managers to use their judgment." I nearly asked what happened if the owner disagreed with my judgment, called me ungrateful, and hid a personal loan in an office supply budget. Instead, I said, "I'd like the evening to review everything." "Of course." When I got home, there was an email with the formal offer. I read it 5 times. The duties were familiar. The language around them was not. Authority to approve vendor arrangements. Responsibility for process, not personal liability for every outcome. After-hours escalation rotation. Rotation. The word looked fictional. I called Denise. They offered me the job. She screamed loudly enough that I pulled the phone from my ear. Ron's voice came through in the background. "Did she join the cult?" Denise said, $88,000, you jackass." Ron got on the phone. "Do they know about you?" "I interviewed twice. Background check? Pending. There's still hope." I laughed. Then Denise said, "You're taking it, right?" The hesitation embarrassed me. "I think so." "Mara." "I know." "No, you don't. I have listened to you apologize to vendors for things Frank did since the Bush administration. That is historically inaccurate. Take the job." After we hung up, I called Paige. She answered from a hotel conference room in Chicago. Through the camera, I could see a whiteboard behind her covered in words like alignment and deliverables. "They made an offer," I said. Her face brightened. "How much?" "Hello to you, too." "How much?" 88. She leaned back. "Take it. Apparently everyone has agreed, because it's obvious." "It doesn't feel obvious." "That's because Dad trained you to treat leaving as a moral failure." I looked at her. "What?" she said. That was almost insightful. "I've had a difficult week." She asked me to forward the benefit summary, then spent 20 minutes explaining why the retirement match was better than I realized. Dad had never offered a retirement plan. He used to point toward the business and say, "That's all our retirement," as if I were included in the hour. The next morning, I accepted. I had just signed the electronic letter when Allison called. Her voice was crisp and low, and she introduced herself as if we were meeting in person. "Your transition materials are unusually thorough," she said. "Thank you. I especially appreciated the section labeled Frank." I closed my eyes. "Paige gave you that?" "She gave me everything." Dad must be thrilled. "Mr. Bennett has expressed reservations about my presence." "What did he call you?" There was a pause. "The audit lady. You got off easy." Allison wanted to know about vendor terms, owner draws, and several old transfers she could not classify. I answered the questions that involved business operations. When she asked about the entries labeled P, I told her to speak to Paige and Dad. Before we ended the call, she said, "I'm preparing a 30-day cash flow analysis." Paige asked whether you would attend the review. "I don't work there." She said that might be your answer. Then why did she ask? "Because one proposed expense is repayment to you." That got me to the meeting. We held it at my parents' house because Dad refused to sit in his own conference room while a stranger explained his company to him. Allison arrived with a laptop and one slim folder. Dad looked offended that she had not brought enough paper. Mom served coffee and cut a pound cake into pieces so thin they bent when lifted. She'd been doing that since the notebook dinner, feeding everyone cautiously, as if thicker slices might cause another confession. Paige attended on video from Chicago. Her face occupied Mom's tablet, propped against a ceramic rooster in the center of the table. Dad pointed at the screen. "Why is she sideways?" "I'm not sideways," Paige said. "You are to me." Mom rotated the tablet. Now the image was upside down. "Just leave it," Paige said. Allison waited until we had stopped rearranging my sister. Then she gave us the numbers. The company still made money on ordinary work. Its service agreements were stable, its customer base was loyal, and the technicians were productive. But cash had been damaged by the consulting transfer, delayed collections, underpriced jobs, and Dad's habit of paying personal expenses from whichever account contained money. "I always put it back," he said. Allison looked at her notes. "Sometimes I knew where everything was. Your records indicate that Mara knew where everything was." Dad's eyes moved to me. I kept my hands around my coffee cup. Allison continued. To restore normal operations, Bennett Sons needed to collect its largest receivables, stop owner withdrawals beyond a fixed amount, negotiate the remaining supplier debt, and reduce the credit line. Repaying me at the schedule I proposed was possible, but only if no more cash left the company for personal reasons. Mom looked at Dad. "No more." He rubbed his forehead. "Nobody is moving money." Paige's voice came from the tablet. "You moved $900 Tuesday. That was property insurance. On the boat." Dad looked at Mom. Mom's face went blank. "What boat?" "The fishing boat." "You sold the fishing boat." "I sold the old one." "You have another boat?" "It isn't another boat. It replaced the old one." "When?" "This isn't relevant." Allison glanced at me. Her professional expression was heroic. Paige said, "The business can't pay your boat insurance. It's used for customer development." Mom turned toward him. "You took customers fishing?" "I could. Have you?" "That's not the point." Allison closed her folder for a moment and waited for the marriage to pass over us like weather. When she resumed, she presented two paths. The first was keeping the company and following strict controls while Dad recovered. It required a permanent office manager, ongoing bookkeeping, and enough new cash to reduce the most expensive debt. The second was preparing the business for sale. Dad's chair creaked as he sat back. "No." Allison did not react. "I'm not recommending either option yet. You can remove that one." "Frank," Mom said. "No, I built that business. You also had a stroke. I'm recovering." Paige said, "Recovery doesn't solve the credit line." "I know the credit line." "Do you?" "Because you told 3 different people 3 different balances." Dad pointed at the tablet. "You're the reason it has a balance." Paige went still. He regretted it. I saw that before his face softened. "I didn't mean, yes, you did," she said. "I chose to help you, and now every time the number scares you, you call it my debt. Every time Mom asks, it was your investment. It can be both." "No, Dad, that's exactly the problem." Mom stared at the table. "How much new cash?" Allison named a figure that would cover the immediate supplier obligations and bring the credit line payment back into a manageable range. $48,000. It was not enough to erase the debt. It was enough to stop every ordinary week from becoming an emergency. Dad said, "Receivables will cover it." "Not soon enough," Allison replied. "We can stretch train. You already have. Carrier will wait. They are waiting. I can bring in more jobs. You are not cleared to drive. I don't need to drive to sell." I watched the old machine trying to restart itself. Dad would promise more, sell more, postpone more, and use whoever stood nearest as the bridge. "I know 2 people who asked about buying," I said. Everyone looked at me. Dad's eyes narrowed. "Who?" "Ron and Luis." Luis Ortega had worked for Bennett Sons for 18 years and supervised our commercial installations. He and Ron had asked Dad the previous winter whether he had ever considered retiring. Dad told them he planned to be buried in the warehouse and changed the subject. "They can't afford my company," Dad said. "You don't know what they can afford. I know what I pay them." "Another argument for selling," Paige said. Dad glared at the tablet. Allison said, "An internal sale can be structured over time, but that discussion would require valuation and professional advice. Today we're identifying options. Take it off the list." "No," Mom said. Dad turned to her. "Excuse me." I said no. "Leave it on." He stared at his wife as if she had spoken through the ceramic rooster. Mom folded her hands. "I canceled kitchen counters while you insured a secret boat through the business. I'm looking at every option. It's not a secret boat." "Where is it?" "At the marina." "Which marina?" Dad looked at his coffee. Mom nodded once. "Secret boat." The meeting ended without a decision. Allison packed her laptop. Dad disappeared into the den. Mom followed him, carrying the untouched pound cake like evidence of a separate failure. I stayed at the table with Paige's face on the screen. "Did you know about the boat?" I asked. "No, that's almost comforting." "Mara." Something in her voice made me sit back down. She looked over her shoulder and closed the conference room door in Chicago. Dad told me the credit line was nearly maxed before he sent the 68. The house became very quiet. "How nearly?" He said there was about 90 available, and you took 68. I told myself receivables would come in. He told me they would. "You knew it put the company at risk. I knew it reduced the cushion. Don't use consultant words." Her face tightened. "Yes, I knew." I waited. She pressed her palms together in front of her mouth. I was 2 weeks from missing my own payroll. 3 clients had delayed contracts. 1 backed out. I had signed an office lease, hired people, promised everyone we were growing. Dad called, and I lied at first. I told him I needed money to accelerate. "But you were failing." I was failing. The words seemed to take something out of her. "He asked how much would get me through the quarter," she continued. "I said 68. I expected him to negotiate. He transferred it the next morning. And you accepted it." "Yes." "Why didn't you call me?" "Because you would have asked the questions he didn't." I looked away. "I hated you for that," she said. "Not because you judged me, because you made things real. I covered payroll with my savings because he protected you from real. I know. No, you know now." She nodded. "I know now." The anger in me did not disappear. It changed shape. For years, I had imagined Paige moving through life with doors opening because she deserved them. I had not imagined her standing behind one of those doors, holding it shut with both hands so we would not see the room collapsing. "What are you going to do?" I asked. She lowered her hands. "I talked to a broker about my condo." I stared at her. "You're selling it?" "I have enough equity to stabilize the company and repay most of what Dad gave me." "Most?" "After the mortgage and fees. You live there. I can rent. You love that place." I loved being the person who owned it. The distinction sounded like it had taken her years to say. "Dad will tell you not to," I said. "I know. He'll say it was an investment." "I know. Mom will worry you're sacrificing too much." A small, bitter smile crossed her face. "I'd like to try it once." I did not smile back. "Don't sell it to earn forgiveness," I said. "I'm not." "Then why?" She looked past the camera, toward the whiteboard full of promises somebody would eventually measure, because the money wasn't a gift just because Dad needed it to feel like one. Dad called Paige before she had finished speaking to the broker. I knew because she called me immediately afterward and said, "He forgave the loan. You mean the investment?" He used both words in one sentence. "What did you say?" I told him he can call it a pony. The business still needs cash. I heard traffic around her. She was walking somewhere in Chicago, breathless and angry. He said selling the condo would prove you bullied me into feeling guilty. Of course he did. He also said you've always been jealous of it. I helped you move into it. He said that was when the jealousy started. I assembled your bed frame. Badly. You bought it from a website with no vowels. One of us laughed. I'm still not sure which. Paige listed the condo. Dad responded by refusing her calls for 2 days, then sent her a real estate article about the dangers of selling in a soft market. The article was 9 years old and about Miami. Mom called to ask whether Paige would be homeless. She earns more than both of us, I said. That doesn't mean she should throw away her home. She's going to rent. Rent is throwing money away. Then she can live on the secret boat. Mom hung up on me. In the middle of all that, I started my new job. On my first morning, Camille showed me a glass-walled office with my name printed on a temporary card beside the door. The office was smaller than Dad's and larger than any space I had ever had to myself. There was no ceramic furnace, no coffee ring on the desk, and no drawer filled with checks someone had forgotten to deposit. Camille handed me a laptop and said, "You'll spend this week observing. Don't fix anything yet." I thought she was joking. She was not. I sat in meetings where people took notes on the decisions they made. If someone promised a customer a discount, the discount appeared in the system. If a manager requested a report, nobody called his daughter at home to ask what he meant. At 5:15, I was still at my desk reading service metrics. Camille stopped in the doorway. "You can go home." "I know. Do you?" I looked at the clock. She smiled. "Tomorrow we'll still have problems." I left at 5:23 and spent the drive waiting for somebody to call me back. Nobody did. The quiet felt less like freedom than being left out. That was the part I had not expected. I missed knowing the answer. I missed Denise dropping mail on my desk and Ron appearing with a problem he pretended was a complaint. I even missed Dad's terrible coffee, which tasted like something extracted from roofing material. Knowing I should leave had not made leaving clean. The condo received an offer in 11 days. Paige sent me the number, followed by, "If you say this proves Dad was right about the market, I'll block you." I replied. Miami remains uncertain. After the sale expenses and her mortgage, she would have enough to put $48,000 into Bennett Sons and repay another portion directly to Dad. It did not erase the old transfers. It did not return the years. It made the next month ordinary, which was more valuable than it sounded. Dad refused the money. Paige transferred it anyway. He sent it back. She sent it to the business account Allison controlled. Dad called the bank. Allison called Paige. Paige called me and said, "I understand why you drink diner coffee alone." Allison froze no accounts and overruled no owner. She simply documented the deposit, paid the supplier amounts they had agreed on, and sent everyone an updated cash flow report before Dad could turn the money into another rescue. He called it disrespectful. Mom called it necessary. I called it from my desk at lunch and listened to both of them argue through a conference call I had not agreed to join. "You took her home," Dad said. "Now she's renting some box." "My apartment is 1,400 square feet, Paige said. "You haven't found an apartment. I'm looking." "You didn't have to sell." "Yes, I did. I told you the money was forgiven." "You can't forgive a debt that belongs to the company. I own the company." Mom's voice cut through. "And the company owes Mara." Dad became quiet. Mom had begun using that sentence whenever he drifted toward the idea that all family money eventually became his. The first time I heard her say it, I had to mute myself. Paige said, "The deposit stabilizes operations. Now we discuss the sale." "There is no sale. Ron and Luis are interested. They work for me." "That is generally how an internal sale begins. You girls have been talking behind my back. Mara hasn't been involved." That was true until Ron called me that evening. "Chicago says we need a meeting," he said. "So have a meeting. She wants you there." "No. Frank wants you there too." That surprised me. Dad agreed to meet? He agreed to explain why we can't afford a company whose revenue he has never told us. That sounds like him. Luis came on the line. His voice was softer than Ron's and usually more effective. "We want to know what we're buying, Mara. Allison has the books. Allison has 4 weeks of corrected books. You know the customers. I'm not coming back. We're not asking you to." Ron said something muffled. Luis added, "Ron says, if you wanted the place, we'd be having a different conversation. I don't want it. We know." I looked around my new office. It was after 6. I had stayed late again without noticing. "What do you need?" "Sit at the table," Luis said. "Tell Frank when he's lying." So I attended. We met at the shop on Saturday. Ron wore his best flannel shirt. Luis brought his wife, Elena, who managed a dental office and had already made her own spreadsheet. Paige flew in from Chicago. Allison attended with the company records. Mom brought a cheese tray no one touched. Dad sat at the head of the conference table. I took a chair near the wall. Ron and Luis made a serious offer. It was not the number Dad had imagined when he talked about selling someday. That number changed depending on who was listening and whether he had recently seen a boat catalog. Their offer was based on the company's actual earnings, equipment, customer contracts, and debt. They could make a modest payment up front. The rest would come in monthly installments over several years. Dad would consult for 90 days, but he would not control spending or scheduling. 90 days? He said. Ron nodded. Transition. I've done this for 34 years, and we respect that. Apparently for 90 days. Luis leaned forward. Frank, you taught me commercial installation when I was 28. You let me take a truck home when my car died. Nobody's pushing you out. Dad looked at him. You're offering me less than the building is worth. The building isn't included, Allison said. I know that. It says here the company leases the building from you. I know my own arrangement. Ron glanced at me. I shook my head slightly. Dad was embarrassed, not lying. Elena opened her spreadsheet. We can discuss a separate lease at market rate. Dad bristled. I'm not charging my own company market rate. You won't own the company, Paige said. The words changed the room. Dad stared at her. Mom moved a cube of cheese from one side of her plate to the other. He looked at me next. And what do you think? It was the first time he had asked without already placing the correct answer in my mouth. I think the offer is fair. His face closed. But I also think the name matters to you, I added, and whether they keep the technicians and whether the customers get taken care of. Ron said, everybody stays. Luis nodded. Same name too, if that's important. Dad's eyes moved toward the faded Bennett Sons sign visible through the conference room window. You're not Sons, he said. Ron scratched his mustache. Little late to notice. Even Dad smiled. It disappeared quickly. What happens to Mara's repayment? He asked. Allison answered. The business portion can be included among the obligations paid from the down payment. The personal items remain yours. Dad looked at the table. What personal items? Ron asked. Nothing relevant, I said. Dad glanced at me, surprised by the protection. I was surprised too. The meeting lasted 4 hours. Dad challenged every figure. Ron lost his temper twice. Luis never raised his voice, which annoyed Dad more. Paige corrected Dad when he inflated a contract's value and defended him. When Allison discounted the strength of long-time customer relationships. I watched her do both. At one point, Dad's left hand began shaking. Mom quietly put a sandwich beside him. He ate half while arguing about truck depreciation. By the end, they had no final agreement, but Dad consented to an independent valuation and another meeting. For Dad, consent to another meeting was practically a surrender ceremony. After everyone left, I found him alone in the warehouse. He stood beside one of the service vans, running his fingers over the blue lettering on the door. You all think I'm finished, he said. No, you took another job. Yes. Paige sold her home. Yes. Your mother sides with the audit lady, Allison. I know her name. I leaned against a workbench. Nobody thinks you're finished. You're selling my company. You agreed to a valuation. Same thing. No, it isn't. He looked toward the rows of metal shelving, the old equipment, the stains in the concrete. I built every part of this. You did, with nothing. I know. You don't know. You were little. I let that one pass. Adult story guard doesn't mean can't mention being little. Kid natural passing okay? Fine. Dad touched the van again. When the bank said no, I borrowed from your grandfather. When he wanted it back early, I sold my truck. Your mother answered phones from our kitchen. And then I answered them here. He looked at me. Yes, he said. You did. The admission sat between us without decoration. I wanted him to say more. I wanted gratitude specific enough to have dates and amounts. He only nodded toward my clothes. You dress nicer now. I've been there 3 weeks. You hate suits. I'm not wearing a suit. Those pants have a crease. They came that way. He smiled faintly. Then he said, Come back. No, I'll match the salary. You can't afford to. I'll make it work. That's what got us here. His face hardened again. So that's it? I'm still your daughter. You don't call. When I call, you ask me about work. We work together. We did other things before that. Like what? The question hurt both of us. Dad looked down at his hand. Finally, he said, Drive me home. Where's Mom? She left with Paige. Why? I told them I had a ride. You didn't. I do now. It was manipulation, ordinary and almost tender. I should have refused on principle. Instead, I drove him home. He complained about my route and adjusted the air vent twice. Halfway there, he asked whether my new company used train or carrier. I told him both. He gave me an unsolicited explanation of why that was weak purchasing strategy. At his driveway, he did not get out immediately. There's something in the notebook I want to show you, he said. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. What? Not tonight, Dad. He opened the door carefully. Come by Sunday, he said. No accounts, no spreadsheets, just you. Then he shut the door before I could decide whether to believe him. I went Sunday. Dad opened the door before I knocked. He was wearing jeans and a gray polo shirt, and his left hand rested against the doorframe as if he had been waiting there longer than he wanted me to know. You're late, he said. It's 2 minutes after 10. I said 10. You said Sunday. He considered that, then stepped aside. Mom was in the kitchen making French toast. She looked surprised to see me, which meant Dad had not told her I was coming. So much for his new relationship with disclosure. I thought you were meeting Paige, she said. Later. Dad walked past us toward the dining room. I asked her here. Mom looked at me. For what? He said no accounts. I said no spreadsheets. You also said there was something in the notebook. Mom closed her eyes. Frank. The black notebook sat on the table beneath the brass chandelier. I stopped in the doorway. Dad pulled out a chair. Sit. I'm beginning to understand why you struggled to hire people. Sit down, Mara. I sat. He opened the notebook, not to the yellow marked page, but near the beginning. The paper had gone soft and gray along the edges. The first entry he showed me was dated 15 years earlier. Mara covering phones through October. Pay hourly. Underneath that, in darker ink, he had added, Good with vendors. Keep through holidays. I looked at him. You wanted to fire me after October? I didn't say fire. You wrote keep through holidays like I was seasonal inventory. You said you were helping temporarily. I was. Dad turned the page. Mara taking billing until Linda back. Mara knows payroll program. Mara staying full-time. Talks salary. He had underlined that last one once. What am I supposed to see? I asked. That I noticed. I stared at the pages. The entries continued. Notes about work I had taken over. Problems I had solved. Responsibilities that moved toward me one by one. Mara handles service contracts. Mara has vendor relationship. Mara can train Denise. Mara will know. At first the words warmed me. Then they became familiar in a different way. You wrote down every time my job got bigger. Yes, but not whether my salary did. Dad frowned. I gave you raises. You did. I paid you fairly. You offered me $75 the day I quit and called it an acknowledgement of my value. I was trying to make things right. You were trying to keep me. Those are not opposite things. No. That's what made it confusing. Mom entered carrying 3 plates. She set one in front of each of us without asking whether we wanted French toast. Dad moved the notebook away from the syrup. "What are you showing her?" Mom asked. "That I didn't take her for granted." Mom looked down at the open pages. "You wrote 'Mara will know' 6 times, she said. I counted on her. That's not the same as thanking her." Dad's jaw tightened. "Could I do this without commentary?" "No," Mom said. "Apparently that was part of the problem." I cut into the French toast. It was crisp at the edges and undercooked in the center, because Mom always used bread that was too thick. The familiarity of it made my throat hurt. Dad turned to a blank page near the back. My repayment schedule had been copied there in his handwriting, $18,920. Below the total, he had written 6 payment dates and amounts. "I can do this once the sale closes," he said. "You agreed to sell?" "I agreed the offer is fair. That wasn't my question." He glared at me. Mom poured syrup onto her plate. "He agreed. I said I want the service contract valuation reviewed." "Which is part of agreeing," Mom said. Dad ignored her. "The company owes part of this. I owe the rest." "Yes." "You included the furnace at full equipment cost. That's what I paid. I still think we should subtract something because it's in your inheritance." I put down my fork. "The furnace? The house?" Mom said, "Frank." "What? She'll inherit part of the house." "Paige exists," I said. "I know Paige exists." "Good." The notebook could be confusing. His mouth twitched despite himself. He took a folded document from inside the back cover. It was my original repayment schedule, the one I had placed on his desk. He had signed the bottom. There was another signature line. He slid it toward Mom. She looked at him. "What is this?" "Witness. You want me to sign?" That's generally what happens on a signature line. Mom read the document slowly. Dad did not ask me to explain it away or call it family help. He did not tell Mom we could discuss it later. She signed. He handed me the agreement. "I'm sorry I put you in that position," he said. The apology was so direct that I distrusted it. "Which position?" "All of them." "That's broad." "I'm trying." I folded the agreement along the existing crease. "I know." Dad looked at the notebook. "I thought you stayed because you wanted the company someday. I never said that. You never said you didn't. I kept waiting for things to settle down. They never do." "No." He rubbed his thumb against the page. The tremor was almost gone now. "I relied on you because you never made me feel frightened," he said. "When something went wrong, you fixed it. You didn't cry in parking garages. You didn't ask me if we were going to lose everything. You just handled the next thing." There it was, the praise and the wound in the same sentence. "And you repaid that safety by making my life smaller." He looked up. Mom stopped cutting her toast. "I had friends who changed jobs," I said. "People asked me to travel. I stopped dating anyone who lived more than 20 minutes away because I knew I'd be called back. I bought an apartment close to the shop. I built my whole life around being reachable. I didn't ask you to stop dating. You didn't have to ask for each piece. You just made sure the emergency was always real." Dad's face folded inward. For once, he did not defend himself with intent. "I didn't know," he said. "You didn't want to know." He nodded once. It was not enough. It was more than I had expected. Mom pushed her plate away. I liked that Paige needed less from us. Paige was not there, but the room changed around her name. Mom looked at me. "When people asked about you, I said you worked with your father. When they asked about Paige, I had a whole speech. Chicago, consulting, clients. It made me feel like we had done something right, and me staying meant you hadn't? No." She pressed her napkin flat. "You staying meant we still needed help." I waited. "I think I praised her independence because your dependability embarrassed me," she said. "Not you, me." Dad looked at her as if this was new information about their marriage. Mom continued. "That toast was cruel." "Yes." I thought it was a compliment to Paige. It was also an insult to me. "Yes." The agreement crackled under my hand. Mom asked, "Do you forgive us?" "No." Her eyes widened. "Not yet," I said. "I'm not trying to punish you. I just don't want to say it because everybody finally had one honest breakfast." Dad looked offended. "The French toast isn't honest. It's raw in the middle." He picked up his fork and inspected his piece. "It's custardy." "Thank you," Mom said. I met Paige in Chicago that afternoon. She had scheduled the condo closing for the following Friday and spent the weekend packing. I found her sitting on the floor between two towers of boxes, drinking wine from a coffee mug because every glass was wrapped. The view behind her was the one Mom had mentioned for years. The river, the old brick buildings, the strip of sky that turned orange between them. Empty, the condo looked smaller. Paige handed me the mug. "Tell me I'm doing the right thing. You told me not to let you sell it for forgiveness." That was when I felt stronger. I sat beside her and took a drink. "Do you regret it?" I asked. "Yes." "Good." She stared at me. "You love this place. You should regret losing it. I expected you to say it's just an apartment. It isn't." She leaned her head against the wall. "Dad texted that he signed your agreement." "He did." "Mom?" "Witnessed it." Paige nodded slowly. "He hasn't asked me for a repayment schedule. Do you want one?" "I think I want to know what the number is. Then calculate it with Allison. What if it's more than I can pay? It already is. That's comforting. You can still write it down." She looked toward the windows. "I spent years thinking you kept score because you were bitter. I kept score because Dad's numbers stopped matching. You remembered every time I missed something. Yes. Birthdays, holidays, Mom's surgery. Yes. Do you remember when I came?" I thought about it. She had come after Mom's surgery 2 days late because of a client meeting. She had cleaned the bathroom without being asked and ordered groceries that included 6 kinds of sparkling water, but no coffee. I had remembered the delay, not the cleaning. "You scrubbed the shower," I said. Paige smiled faintly. "It was disgusting." "You reorganized the refrigerator. You had 4 open jars of mustard. They were different mustards. You sound like Dad with the blue cards." We both laughed. Then she said, "I'm sorry I let you become the cost of helping me." I looked down at the wine in the mug. "That's better than sorry for all of it," I said. "I practiced. I can tell. Do you forgive me?" "Not yet. Mom said you'd say that." "Mom asked." She called from the bathroom so Dad wouldn't hear. Progress. Paige rested her head on my shoulder. We sat that way until my arm went numb, looking at the view she had purchased partly with Dad's money and paid for partly with her own ambition, fear, and sleep. Nothing about it separated cleanly. The independent valuation came back close to Ron and Luis's offer. Dad fought over the customer list, the lease, the value of the name, and whether his consulting period should be 90 days or 180. Ron threatened to walk. Luis brought him back. Mom refused to let Dad use Paige's deposit as proof the company was stronger than it was. They signed the final agreement on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I did not attend. At my new job, a dispatcher had discovered that 2 service regions were assigning the same technicians after hours. It was a real problem, and it belonged to me. I spent the afternoon fixing the rotation with 3 managers who thanked me and went home. Dad called at 6. "It's done," he said. "How do you feel?" "I don't know. That makes sense." Ron insisted on changing the truck replacement schedule. He's been complaining about it for 10 years. He's wrong. Probably. Dad breathed into the phone. "They're having some kind of dinner." "Who is they?" "Your mother and Paige." "For the sale?" "They're calling it retirement." "You are retiring. I'm consulting for 120 days. Congratulations on the extra 30. I earned them." I smiled. He said, "You'll come?" "Yes." "You don't know when it is." "You're my father." "I'll come." He went quiet. Then he said, "Wear those pants with the crease." The retirement dinner was scheduled for the following month at the same Italian restaurant where Bennett's Sons had held its holiday parties for 20 years. Mom told me it would be small. When I arrived, there were 63 people in the room and a banner large enough to be seen from the highway. The banner said, "Congratulations, Frank," in blue letters, with a cartoon furnace wearing a party hat. Dad stood beneath it arguing with the restaurant manager about the thermostat. "You're retired 12 minutes and already working," I said. He turned. His eyes went immediately to my pants. "They have a crease. You requested it." "I didn't think you'd listen." "I listen. I just don't always obey." He held out his right arm. I hugged him carefully, though he was strong enough now to object. "You look good," I said. "The shirt's too big. It fits. Your mother bought it while I was in rehabilitation. Everything she bought was too big, like she expected me to retain water." Mom appeared beside him wearing a dark green dress and an expression of organized panic. "You're here," she said. "I said I would be." "I know, but you were always late to the Christmas party, because I was at the shop finishing payroll." Mom's smile flickered. I touched her arm. "The room looks nice." She had covered every table with photographs from the company's history. Dad beside his first service van, Mom answering a beige telephone at their kitchen table, Ron with brown hair, Luis receiving an Employee of the Year plaque he had apparently been using to level a workbench. There were photographs of me, too. In one, I stood beside Dad at a trade show, both of us wearing matching Bennett Sons polo shirts. In another, Denise and I were holding a retirement cake for a dispatcher who had lasted 4 months beyond retirement before returning part-time. Paige appeared in 3 pictures. 2 were from holiday parties. In the third, she was holding a giant pair of scissors at the ribbon cutting for the current shop. Mom followed my eyes. I tried to include everyone. "You did. I found half of these in your father's office. Did you find the boat?" Dad, still within hearing, said, "Enough about the boat. It had been sold. Mom handled that sale personally. Paige arrived carrying a garment bag because her flight had been delayed and she had changed in the restaurant restroom. Her dress was navy, simple and elegant. She still wore sneakers. Mom looked down. "You forgot your shoes." "My shoes are in Detroit." "Why?" "My suitcase is in Detroit." "Then what's in the garment bag?" "Consultant secrets." She hugged Dad, then me. The condo sale had closed the previous week. Paige had moved into a rental 6 blocks away, a place with smaller windows, a larger kitchen, and what she described as criminally beige carpet. She had sent Dad a repayment proposal prepared with Allison. Dad argued over the word debt for 3 days, then signed it. Paige and I were still not calling what existed between us forgiveness. We texted most days. Sometimes it was a real conversation. Sometimes she sent a photograph of something badly color-coded at the shop and wrote, "Thinking of you." Ron found me near the bar. He wore a sport coat over his company polo, an arrangement that suggested he might sell you either a furnace or a used car. "New boss," I said. "Co-new boss." "Where's Luis?" Explaining to Frank that retirement means he can't approve overtime. Across the room, Luis stood with Dad beside a table, listening with the calm face of a man diffusing equipment. "How's ownership?" I asked. "I haven't slept since Tuesday." "You'll adjust." "Denise says I'm not allowed to call you. Denise is wise. She says we can call if we're inviting you to lunch or somebody is on fire." "Reasonable." "Does the equipment count as somebody?" "No." "Good to know." He handed me a glass of wine. The company's sale had not made anyone rich. Dad still owned the building and received rent. Ron and Luis had loans, monthly payments, and a frightening awareness of truck repair costs. The supplier accounts were current. The credit line had room again. Allison stayed on permanently for 2 days a week, which Dad described as unnecessary whenever he called her with a question. The business had survived Mara withdrawal. So had Mara. At my new job, I had taken my first Friday off without packing my laptop. I spent most of it waiting for guilt to produce an emergency. By 4, nothing had happened, so I went to a movie alone and turned off my phone. That detail seemed too small to tell anyone. It felt enormous. Denise tapped a spoon against her glass to call the room to order. "Frank says speeches should be short," she announced. "Frank has never made anything short in his life, including an estimate, so we will ignore him." People laughed. Dinner had been served family style. Platters of chicken parmesan, bowls of pasta, and bread baskets crowded the tables. Dad had complained that the chicken was dry while eating 2 pieces. Luis spoke first. He thanked Dad for teaching him the trade and trusting him with customers long before Luis trusted himself. Ron said Dad had given him a job when other companies considered him too old to start over, then added that Frank had spent the next 23 years reminding him. Denise told a story about Dad taking a service call on Christmas Eve after the customer admitted another company had installed the furnace. Dad interrupted to clarify that the other company had installed it wrong. Everybody in the room had a Frank story. That was what I had missed when I reduced him to the notebook. Dad had been generous with more than money. He gave people second chances, extended payment plans, delivered space heaters during outages, and remembered the names of customers' dogs. The same man who used me could be the person Ron called when his car died and the person Luis trusted with his career. Contradiction did not erase harm. Harm did not erase the rest. Mom stood when dessert arrived. She had 3 index cards, which meant we were in danger. When Frank started this company, she began, we had 1 truck, a kitchen phone, and more confidence than sense. Dad called, I had sense. Mom looked at him over her glasses. We had 1 truck. She talked about the early years, the first employees, the current building, and the name Bennett Sons. We kept expecting the sons to arrive, she said. Instead, we got daughters who were smarter than any sons we could have imagined. Dad leaned toward me. She practiced that, I can tell. Mom thanked Ron and Luis. She thanked Denise, the technicians, the spouses who tolerated emergency calls, and Allison, whom she referred to as the audit lady before correcting herself. Then she looked at Paige. And when Frank got sick and the accounts were in such a terrible state, Paige dropped everything. She came home, took control, and I honestly believe she saved. Paige closed her eyes. My body reacted before my mind did. My shoulders tightened. My fingers found the edge of my napkin. For 1 second, we were back beneath the brass chandelier with the meatloaf cooling between us. Dad stood. It took him longer than it once would have. His left hand pressed against the table. The room quieted. Linda? He said. Mom stopped. He held out his hand for the microphone. She gave it to him slowly. Dad looked at Paige first. Paige helped fix what she owed, he said. That's not the same as saving us. A murmur moved through the room, not because everyone understood, but because Dad had departed from the approved speech. Paige's face reddened. Dad continued before I could decide whether he was protecting her or exposing her. She made mistakes. So did I. Most of mine involved thinking I could move money faster than consequences. Ron said, that should be on the company's shirt. The room laughed gently. Dad looked toward me. Mara kept the accounts, he said, and the payroll, and the suppliers, and the customers I promised things to without telling her. More laughter, this time from people who knew exactly what he meant. She worked at Bennett Sons for 15 years, he continued. Every time something went wrong, I handed it to her because she could handle it. Then, because she handled it, I decided it had not cost her anything. No one laughed. I stared at Dad. He did not look away. I praised one daughter for leaving and used the other for staying, he said. When Mara finally put the truth on the table, I accused her of hurting the family. What she did was stop helping me hide what I had done. Mom lowered her index cards. Dad rubbed his thumb along the microphone. We almost lost the company, he said. We came closer to losing her. My eyes burned. I looked down at the tablecloth, at a drop of wine beside my glass. This was what I had wanted once. Public acknowledgement, specific and undeniable. I had imagined it would fill something. Instead, it gave the empty space a name. Dad said, I'm proud of both my daughters. Not for what they fixed for me, for what they finally refused to. He handed the microphone back to Mom. For several seconds, the room was silent. Then Ron began clapping. Luis joined him. Denise stood. The applause spread until everybody was looking at us. I hated it. I loved it. Paige reached under the table and took my hand. Mom leaned toward the microphone. Her eyes were wet. I believe, she said, that was supposed to be my speech. Dad sat down. You were getting it wrong. She laughed through her tears. Yes, I was. After dessert, people came to tell me stories about myself. A supplier representative reminded me that I had once gotten a truck released after Dad sent the payment to the wrong account. A technician told me I had talked him out of quitting after an argument with Ron. One longtime customer said, "Your father always told us you ran the place." "That's interesting," I said. "He rarely told me." Dad, passing behind her, heard and kept walking. Paige and I escaped to the hallway near the restrooms. "You okay?" she asked. "No idea." "Same. Dad didn't have to mention your debt. He asked me first." I looked at her. "He did? He showed me the speech yesterday. You knew. I knew his part." "Mom's opening was a surprise. You could have warned me." I thought she had retired the saving line. Mom doesn't retire material. Paige leaned against the wall. I told Dad he could say I owed the money if he also said he chose to hide it. He did. "Yes." "Are you okay?" She considered it. "Ask me after another several years of therapy." "Fair." She looked toward the dining room where Dad was trying to cut the retirement cake before Mom finished taking pictures. "Do you forgive me?" she asked. "Not completely." "Good. Me neither. That isn't how apologies work. I'm innovating." I bumped her shoulder with mine. When the room finally emptied, Dad found me near the coat rack. He held out an envelope. Inside was the first payment under our agreement. Not cash, not a business check, hidden between papers. A personal check from the account he shared with Mom, signed by both of them. I looked at the amount. "This is more than the schedule. Interest." I said I didn't want interest. "I'm not paying interest. I'm rounding." "You rounded up $800? I like whole numbers." Mom appeared behind him. "Take it before he buys another boat." Dad looked offended. "I don't have enough for a boat. That has never stopped you." I put the check back in the envelope. "Thank you," I said. Dad nodded. On the way out, he asked me to help carry a box to his car. It contained cards, framed photographs, a plaque from the Chamber of Commerce, and the black composition notebook. I saw the coffee ring on the cover. Dad saw me see it. "You want this?" he asked. "No, you might need it." "For what?" "In case I forget something. You'll need it more than I will." He rested his hand on the cover. I wrote down the payments. "I have the signed schedule. What if they don't match? Then I'll call you." He looked at me carefully as if that answer contained a test. "Just to ask one thing?" he said. I laughed. "Maybe." He put the notebook back in the box. Mom called from across the parking lot asking whether he had lost the car keys. Dad shouted that he had never been given them. Paige was loading flowers into her rental car. Ron and Louise stood beneath the restaurant awning arguing about Monday's schedule. Every old roll was still available. I handed Dad the box and stepped back before he could ask me to carry it farther. He adjusted the weight against his chest. "I've got it," he said. This time, I let him.